Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started with our work session. Last night on April 7th, 2019, our great state of Maryland lost a House Speaker, Mike Bush, who passed on after a long bout of illness. Mr. Bush's death is a huge loss to all of us on many, many levels. In the over 3 decades he served in the Maryland House of Delegates, he developed a reputation for hard work, collaboration, and respect for all that he interacted with. I will always remember him as a genuine consensus builder who worked hard to ensure everyone in the room was heard. As the longest-serving Speaker of the House in Maryland's history, Mike Bush was a great leader and a caring mentor to several generations of leaders. Whether he was guiding a new group of legislators, standing up to the healthcare industry, or fighting gaming, his humble leadership leaves a lasting legacy across Maryland. In our advocacy in Annapolis, we in Montgomery County have lost a true ally we could always count on, whether it is for fighting for funds for our school children or building our transportation infrastructure. We will miss Mr. Bush. The council sends its sincere condolences to the Bush family and his staffers. And now I would like to offer a moment of silence in honor of Mr. Michael E. Bush. Please stand if you're able. Thank you. Begin our morning with general business. Ms. Limarzi, are there any announcements or petitions?
Nothing this morning.
Thank you so much. So the minutes of March 21st, 25th, and 26th, 2019 have been distributed to council members. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, those are approved. Now we're on to item 2, which is our consent calendar. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Rice, second by Councilmember Hucker. I would like to point out that in the consent calendar, we are introducing resolutions to indicate council's intent to approve or reject provisions of our collective bargaining agreements. And there will be a council work session, and that is tentatively scheduled for April 23rd. So those are some of the items in our consent calendar. I would also like to point out that we are confirming county executive appointment to the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation Board, and that is Mr. Jerome Fletcher. Seeing no lights, all those in favor of adopting the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous among those present. Now on to item number 3. This is an action. It's a special appropriation to Montgomery County Public Schools FY19 capital budget for $5 million for relocatable classrooms, and the source is current revenue. I will need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Rice, second by Councilmember Friedson. Mr. Lechenko.
Yes, just one comment on it. Subsequent to it being introduced by the council, the executive had forwarded his recommendations, which included a funding switch to utilize recordation tax within this otherwise current revenue funded project. I did check with Dr. Orlin, who manages our CIP reconciliation process in terms of looking at the switching, the revenue source switches, and he concurred with this approach. So staff is recommending that funding switch in this as part of the action today.
So the funding switch would be from current revenue to recordation tax?
A portion of the $5 million, yes.
Okay. Okay. So with that particular amendment, I guess, of the revenue source, all those in favor, please raise your hands. That's unanimous among those present. Great. So now we're on to item 4. This is an action on ZTA 19-3, commercial residential zones, animal board and care. The Fed committee recommends enactment, and here comes the chair. And this, I will turn it over to Councilmember Reamer, who chairs.
Thank you. Didn't want to miss this very controversial and significant ZTA.
This is leadership.
Sorry. This ZTA is to allow animal boarding in CR zones, which is presently not allowed. Is that right, Jeff?
It's allowed only as a conditional use right now.
It's allowed only as a conditional
This would make it a limited use.
This is make it a limited use. So this could produce some noise. You could hear animal noise, so we'll pay attention to how this goes, but we have an applicant we have a user who wants to be able to offer a kennel type. And so this is a recommendation from the county executive to amend this use.
And even as a limited use, it requires soundproofing, and if you do an outdoor run, it requires distance from other houses.
So there are appropriate precautions.
Yes, and the planning board did recommend some changes because right now it's only allowed as a conditional use. They had specific standards for the conditional use of CR zone animal boardings, and they recommended deleting that to avoid the confusion. The committee agreed with that amendment.
Committee agree with the amendment, 3-0.
Correct.
Okay, great. And it was, I introduced this on behalf of the executive. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. I just wanted to note and really thank council staff for being up on the times and making sure that for those of us who will be tweeting out about our great work, that we have a hashtag animal boarding that's listed there as a part of the packet. So thank you very much for that, sir.
Excellent. We're keeping up with the times indeed. Okay, so this is a show of hands. Yep. All right. Is it what? Roll call. So roll call. All right.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Hucker? Yes. Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Reamer? Yes. Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Albornoz? Yes. Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice? Yes. Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Yes. Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Katz? Yes. Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes, and that is unanimous. Okay, so yes, Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm sorry for being late, but I would like to be counted as voting for the consent calendar, please.
Excellent. And Councilmember Reamer has asked to be added also. Great. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item number 5, and this is the County Council's overview of the County Executive's FY20 recommended budget. On March 15th, 2019, the County Executive transmitted to the County Council his recommended operating budget, in which he has proposed to increase the total budget by $142 million, or 2.5%. And this would be to $5,722,955,614. Tax-supported funds would increase by 2.3 to $4,996,234,189. Our review of the county executive's budget will give us an opportunity to examine the executive's priorities as articulated in his proposed budget and to determine whether, in our view, they appropriately and effectively serve our county residents given the competing pressures on the budget. The county council may also determine that certain aspects of the county executive's funding proposal do not match our priorities and choose to reallocate them to other purposes. As we do every year, we intend to take a very close look at the budget request, both at the committee level as well as the full council. We will be guided by several macro issues, including sustainability, compensation increases, appropriate funding for active and retiree health benefits and revenue forecasts. And also note that on April 23rd, the council will receive a very detailed presentation of compensation costs, including both pay and benefits. We will also discuss the sustainability of the recommended cost increases. I want to thank County Council and the County Executive staff for working so hard to provide us the necessary data and analysis for our use as we review the operating budget request. The Council's 5 public hearings on the budget will be held on April 8th, today, to the 10th. Committee work sessions will start on May 6th. Revenue Day and Reconciliation Day off the budget are tentatively scheduled for May 15th and May 16th. Our budget tracking system, which records all committee and council actions, will provide regular updates through May 23rd, 2019, the date for final budget approval. We're looking forward to hearing from our residents at our scheduled public hearings that begin today, where residents will have the opportunity to weigh in on the budget request. And I will now turn over this presentation to our esteemed staff, and I'll turn to Ms. Michelson.
Thank you very much. This year we have a team of staff working for the on the big picture operating budget issues. They're the team you see joining me today. They also include Jacob Sesker, working remotely, and Gene Smith, who could not be joining us this morning for this presentation. Today, our goal is to give you a big picture on the budget. It is a purely factual presentation of what's in the budget. Once we hear from the public, as you will during the public hearings, and as staff gets answers to questions we have asked pass, we'll be formulating recommendations that you'll receive in the course of committee review and council review going forward. And today is really an opportunity for you to ask any questions so that we're aware of any additional analysis you're hoping that we will be doing in the coming weeks. So we're going to start with revenues. And our revenues include property tax, income tax, federal tax, other taxes, recordation tax, and other. And you can see on the slide, which for the printout of the slide that's before you, which for some reason included the numbers, although this on screen did not, the property tax and income tax together end up being 68% of total revenues. This year in the executive recommended budget, there are no changes in any of the tax rates, some changes in fees. So what you see in the budget is just a projection of revenues under existing policies. On the next, there we go. On the next slide is a breakdown right from the budget book. It's a more detailed analysis of the tax-supported revenues, slightly different percentages because this includes prior year reserves as one of the resources we use in building the budget. We also thought it was very important for the council to look at changes in revenue sources over time, and in particular what has happened just in the last year. There have been some significant changes just since the approval of the FY19 budget last May. Property and income taxes are both down, while other sources remain the same or increase. Looking at property tax is set this year at the charter limit. Because there have been rising assessments, there's actually a small decrease in the rate. But we do want to note that the projection for FY19 is down 1.2% from last May. This will be the third year in a row that the actual or the estimates are below the projections, and it's an issue that we think the council should take up most likely in detail over the summer when we think we can really delve into projections on revenue sources. Transfer and recordation taxes are up 10.9%, again from May. This is one of our most volatile revenue streams. It basically tracks what's happening in the large commercial market. So as an example of its volatility, from FY17 to FY18, down 11.5%. The projection just since May, up 10.9%. This is not something we have a lot of control over. Other local taxes are projected to be up 1.7%. This includes our fuel energy tax, which is another significant source of revenue. It is the third highest source of revenue among the local taxes and represents 71% of the category called other local taxes here. It's up close to 2% in FY19, and no changes are projected. Income tax is the one that always is the most troubling for us. The projection at this point in time is that it is down 2.7% from the projection last May. And the FY20 estimate in total, given this decrease, will be up 6.3% from the estimate we had in May. On income taxes, we've had 5 years in a row of having the actual income taxes being below projections, and there are a number of reasons for this we'll talk about in a little bit more depth. FY19 is estimated at this point to be $42.3 million less than projected in May. FY20, $42.7 million less than projected in May. And this is a tax that really has significant volatility. I know the council has heard this before, but our top 50 taxpayers affect significantly what we get in revenues on income tax. For example, those taxpayers in FY15 had capital gains of $1.2 billion. 1 year later, it was half that amount. And we've learned that the decision of approximately less than 2% of our taxpayers who make $500,000 a year or more explain in entirety the reason for any decrease in revenue, in income tax revenues in a given year. We have a lot of factors impacting this. We have the changes in federal tax law, and we quite honestly do not know yet how that will impact our taxes this year. We projected in the past that there may actually be an increase or a bump, but as you can see the earlier comments, so far it's been a decrease. And it's very hard to predict what will happen in the coming year. Finance will continue to be tracking that. The Wynn case decided in FY15 indicates that the county must provide a credit of county income tax for taxes paid to other states. Our back claims on that are $143 million. They are to be paid FY21 to FY26. In addition, we're losing $30 million in revenue each year. Finally, the national and local economy obviously impacts income taxes. And even though the picture has been mixed over the last year or so, more recently we've heard some negative news. First, there's been a decline in the interest rate on long-term bonds. They're currently below short-term bonds, a term called the yield inversion curve. Every time there's been a yield inversion curve over the last 60 years, it's been followed by recession. The Fed declined to raise interest rates, noting that economic growth was slowing more than expected, down to 2.1% from an earlier estimate of 2.3%, and last year's 2.9%. And on the local front, the Washington leading index declined by 1.8% since the same time last year, and has only increased once since mid-2018. And there's also been a decrease in suburban Maryland job growth, significantly from 15,000 in 2017 to 3,000 in 2018. So moving on to expenditures.
So as we noted at the beginning of the presentation, the executives recommended total tax-supported expenditures are just over $5.622 billion, but the pie chart that you're looking at in your presentation shows you that about 47% of all the tax-supported expenditures, and this includes the funds that go to the CIP, are recommended to go to MCPS, 35% to county government, 9.9% to reserves, 5.4% to Montgomery College, and 2.4% to park and planning. Of the total tax-supported expenditures that you're looking at, $4.996 billion are included in the operating budget. The next slide shows the recommended allocations to the agencies. So for Montgomery County Public Schools, the current fund is almost $2.484 billion. The county government general funds and special funds are $1.69 billion. Montgomery College, current and special funds are over $262 million, and the park and planning funds, excluding debt service, are $129.3 million. And then when you include another $430 million in debt service, which will be discussed later, it takes you back up to the $4.996 billion that was noted earlier. I did just want to note for you on this table, it's the executive recommended appropriations, but it is in some cases the requested FTEs, and so you'll see in park and planning, there's a very small change in the appropriation, that's the executive's recommendation, but there is a large change in the FTEs because that's based on the agency request, and so as you get into committee and council, you'll end up having to discuss those in the agencies other than county government, how those things match up. So for MCPS, just some highlights. The $2.6 billion executive recommended budget is a 2% increase from FY19, $13.5 million below the Board of Education request, and $2.5 million above maintenance of effort. For Montgomery College, there's a $310 million executive recommended budget. It's a 1.1 decrease from FY19. It's 3.1 million below the college request. The CE recommendation does satisfy the college maintenance of effort. And for park and planning, again, it's 129.3 million is the recommended tax-supported request. It's a 0.8% increase from FY19, and it's 5.4 million or 4% below the agency request. So this slide shows the tax-supported appropriations for 7 functional areas within county government and also for the non-departmental accounts. And these include both the general fund appropriation and the tax-supported special fund appropriation. They don't include any non-tax supported special funds. And I would just say, especially because I looked at this area, when you look at it, that's important because when you look at this table, for example, in community development and housing, the Housing Initiative Fund is a non-tax supported special fund. So it doesn't show in this particular table, which is only tax supported, even though as a fund, it receives over 25 million in transfer from the general fund into it. But when you look at this specific supported, tax supported chart, I just wanted to highlight for you, if you kind of look at some things and go, that doesn't look quite right, it might be because there's a non-tax supported element to the functional area as well. Also, in each of these functional areas, they're all showing increases in funding, although they can vary within the functional area. So for example, public safety as a functional area includes consumer protection, correction and rehabilitation, emergency management, police, and sheriff. And so within that overall 4.5% increase, you actually have a range within the departments and offices between 2.2% and 6.8%. And so before we move to compensation, I would just say that, you know, as is the case each year, which the council president started in her comments as well, the council considers the executive's recommended reductions and the increases to existing programs. Some of the bigger increases are found in the snow removal and storm cleanup non-departmental account, in the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation and Health and Human Services to better align with historical spending. You see this throughout some of these areas where it's described as addressing a structural deficit or to align with historical spending. There's a significant increase in fire and rescue overtime. The council will also consider executive new initiatives, such as his innovation fund, and also the funding that's included for the 4-year action plan for early care and education initiative, which the council president and the county executive announced in early March and is being implemented in collaboration with MCPS and with the college. And so next, the council is also going to be considering the budget impact of the compensation changes, and that is the next part of the overview.
So when you're talking about expenditures, you have to look at compensation, which, as you all know, is the largest component of expenditures in all of the agencies. As the council president introduced, on April 23rd, we will come back to you with a much more deeper dive into compensation issues, looking at pay and benefits and a staff analysis of sustainability. Today, we're going to very briefly focus on pay, not because benefits aren't important, but the benefit structures are generally unchanged, but we do have new contracts recommended from the county executive. These are new 1-year contracts with each of the bargaining units. On your screen and on page 8 of the packet, you'll see the key provisions. First of all, general wage adjustments or COLAs, cost of living adjustments. You'll see 2.4% recommended for McGeo and IAFF, 2% for our non-represented employees, and the FOP contract does not include a general wage adjustment this year. Again, these are all 1-year contracts. The service increments, otherwise known as the steps, for all employees, the executive's recommending a 3.5% increase. You'll also see that the contracts that the executive recommended for McGeo and FOP include approval of funding for service increments from past years. 3.5% for McGeo from FY11 for those employees who would have received it in those years, and then for FOP for the years FY12 and FY13. To the right, you'll see a column of the maximum cumulative. That is just additive of the rows to the left. Please note that not all employees will be receiving the maximum. We'll be going through those details when we present on April 23rd. Further in your packet, on page 8, are some other key provisions. They're not on the screen here, but there are new longevity adjustments for certain employees in McGeo and correctional officers and deputy sheriffs at 24 years of service, and also at 16 years of service for police officers. The executive also negotiated one-time lump sum payments for McGeo employees who are not eligible for a service increment in this upcoming year, and for FOP officers who do not receive either a previous year service increment or a new longevity increase. We'll also be discussing on April 23rd pay for the management leadership service, where there's performance pay and general wage adjustment and other miscellaneous pay adjustments. Because the council approves the county government contracts, it's important for you to look at the costs. Again, we'll go into this in more detail in a couple of weeks, but the table on page 9 and on your screen shows 4 columns. The first 2 columns are the total costs. That is what all county departments will be paying regardless of how they're funded. And you can see a total of $31 million in FY20 for those costs. Now, because compensation adjustments don't always start in the beginning of the year, some of those costs are rolled over into the next year, and that's the annualized column. So about $10 million more in total cost, about $41.5 million is the annualized cost when all is said and done for the executive's recommendations. And then the 2 columns to the right are the same numbers but tax supported, and that's important for the council because those are the monies that you can move around. The non-tax supported also have an effect, but they mostly have effect on fees that people pay. MCPS is in the second year of 2-year contracts, and you'll see for all their employee groups it's consistent, a 1% general wage adjustment or COLA. In MCPS, they have schedules where their service increments are in different steps and they're not uniform from step to step. They could be as low as 1.5%, as high as 5.5%, but for the most part, they're in the mid-3s, around 3.5%. And so here you'll see for the average employee, the maximum cumulative pay increase is 4.5%. In the packet, we also have some information about the placeholders for park and planning, for WSCC and the college, and again, we'll be discussing those in more detail.
Okay, so, whoops. On this table, it reflects workforce changes for both tax-supported and non-tax-supported for all agencies, and I'm going to focus on the highlights for tax-supported changes for full-time equivalents from FY19 to what's recommended in FY20. So overall, there is a 497 position full FTE increase recommended in FY20, and that amounts to about 1.5% in tax-supported increases for all agencies. That's the county government, MCPS, park and planning, and the college. Moving on, county growth is around 90 FTEs, which represents a 1.1% increase over FY19. While this increase is not large, it is significant given the goals to reduce the size of county government. In MCPS, there is a 1.9% increase recommended. It amounts to 395 tax-supported FTEs. This is twice the growth experienced in FY19, and this can be contributed to increases in enrollment as well as the opening of new schools. And then the remaining portion of the increases comes from program enhancements such as extended school year programs, pre-K, class size reductions for elementary schools, as well as enhancements for special education and ESOL services. The college has a decrease both in tax-supported and non-tax-supported FTEs. And then at park and planning, they're showing an increase of 2% in tax-supported FTEs. However, the executive's recommendation would reduce funding for park and planning by 4%, and it's $5.4 million below their request. The following table shows changes in demographics from FY 2005 to FY 19. The county's population has grown by 14%, households have increased by 10%, and K through 12 enrollment has also increased by 17%. Following that, the county government and as well as the remaining agencies have increased by 15%, and the growth in FTEs range from 14.5% to 21%, with the exception of Park and Planning, who has experienced flat growth over the years.
So the final section of the FY20 budget overview is funding related to the county's fiscal policies for reserve, PAYGO, OPEB, and debt service. The county allocates substantial resources each year to pay for the costs already incurred or to set aside resources for future known obligations. The county's rigorous standards for sound financial management, and in particular its reserve policy, are essential to maintaining the county's AAA bond rating. For reserve, the county's experience during the recession confirmed that a large reserve is essential to sound fiscal management. The executive's budget shows the county reaching a 9.7% reserve level at the end of FY19, in part through actions on OPEB, which I'll discuss in just a minute. And also the budget shows reaching the target 10% reserve level at the end of FY20. Then the current fiscal policy calls for maintaining this 10% level into the future years. So assuming we get there, we'll no longer have to be ramping up the reserve as we have done over the past several years. The county's PAYGO policy is to allocate to the CIP each year PAYGO, or essentially cash, equal to 10% of the planned GEO bond issuance that year. For FY19, that amount was $33 million, and in FY20, the executive's budget adheres to this policy by allocating $32 million for PAYGO based on the planned GEO bond debt issuance. For OPEB, there are a couple key actions in the executive's FY20 budget. First of all, the executive's budget assumes an FY19 savings plan to reduce approved OPEB pre-funding for county government, MCPS, and Montgomery College by a combined $89.6 million, and that's shown at the table at the bottom of the slide in front of you. The executive savings plan transmittal notes that these reductions are needed to restore reserve levels in FY19 due to the revenues falling short of projections. And as a result, we'll be able to meet the assumed 9.7% target at the end of FY19 and the 10% reserve level in FY20, as I mentioned earlier. I do want to make sure that it's clear that the executive's recommendation does not impact the approved pay-as-you-go retiree health funding for current retirees, and current retirees would see no change to their retiree health benefits. The second key OPEB component is that the executive's budget does fully fund the FY20 pay-as-you-go costs for current retirees, which is $83.9 million, and the actuarially determined contribution for pre-funding of $121.4 million. So overall, the total funding of $205.3 million shown in the FY20 CE recommended column of the table represents about 4% of tax-supported spending across all the agencies for retiree health. And the last fiscal policy component is debt service, which has increased by about 70% over the past 10 years as shown in the chart. Debt service represents 8.5% of the FY20 tax-supported budget, making it essentially the county's third largest agency, with funding that is greater than the funding for Montgomery College, Park and Planning, or any individual department of the county government. The debt service budget and its current trajectory reflect decisions already made. This is paying for debt service on bonds issued in past years. However, beginning with the FY19 through 24 CIP, the Council has acted to reduce the size of future debt service costs by lowering the amount of debt issued. So hopefully going forward, we'll see more of a flattening of this chart.
So just to conclude, the council each year reviews the executive's budget very carefully, and there has not been a single year that I can recall that it has not made some significant change that it believes better serves the residents of the county. Sometimes those changes are dollar amount, sometimes they're very small in dollar amount, but still very significant in their impact. And we suspect that this council will do the same as you go through the budget. We have the next steps ahead. As the council president said during her opening, working towards committee work sessions and council work sessions. We welcome your questions now and as you continue to reflect on the operating budget.
Thank you. I think it will definitely be useful when we have the next briefing on compensation and benefits to have, the comparison in terms of benefits. I know it's difficult sometimes to calculate that, but to the extent that it can be approximate, especially because, we're like a new constituted council, and it'd be important to understand what the different agency, pretty much what the benefit structures are. And also, I would love to have a chart that shows the actual revenue estimates versus budget revenue estimates regarding property and income tax for the last 5 years, just to kind of get also a sense of comparison. That would be really great. Okay, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Thank you for this very helpful briefing on many of the important factors we'll be grappling with in the budget this year. I just want to observe that we have some real challenges in this budget, and the fact that our revenues are down yet again for the second or third year in a row, that we are significantly reducing our OPEB contribution once again is very problematic. It's emblematic of the fact that we're in a tough situation, and caution is really called for in the decisions that we make. And as you observed, the forecast for the outlook for the future isn't as rosy as maybe it was 3, 4, or 5 years ago. We don't know. We haven't seen any real evidence yet, but we have to be careful. So that's I think the overall challenge that the council has to assess is, where are we going to be in 2 years? Where are we going to be in 3 years? We don't want to set in motion a budget that we will regret. And that, when you dig yourself in too deep, you spend years trying to get out. And that's what happened after the Great Recession. And I think the ramifications of those decisions are still felt. They're still very poignant. We're, in fact, continuing to see the consequences of compensation, where the annual increases were so high that the overall package wasn't sustainable, and then steps were foregone during the recession. If there had been more modest annual increases, maybe those steps wouldn't have been foregone during the recession. So there's just a lot to think about here. I did want to ask about the FTEs. I fully understand why MCPS's FTEs are up with rising enrollment and our continued desire to want to reduce class size, as well as our policy goals of expanding early childhood. But I'm a little less clear on the county government side. Do you have any specific policies that you can point to as to why the FTEs are up? And generally, I just wanted to ask a question. We've been claiming a lot of lapse over the last couple years with our mid-year savings plans. So why? It seems to me that's a mismatch. If we're constantly pulling back funding for unfunded positions, why are the positions growing overall? I don't quite see how those two things fit together.
Well, we did have a slide that indicated which functional area of county government increased, and it does follow some of the initiatives that the county executive thought were important. We also do have OMB staff here, so if you'd like to answer directly from them, we can. And Linda,
Sure.
you want to jump in with the numbers?
Sure. At the top of page 11, it does outline.
Can we ask, please,
Ms.
Director Madaleno?
Director, yes. Join us. Go ahead, Linda.
I was just saying, at the top of page 11, it does show where some of the notable increases and changes are for county government. So In transit services, there was an increase of 26.5 FTEs. Fire and rescue
Okay,
increased by
I'm sorry,
20.
Linda, one moment. This is page 11 of the packet? or-
Yes, correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You said 26 in transit,
Correct.
20,
20 in fire and rescue. HHS has an increase of 12 FTEs. Police has 7. Community engagement cluster has 6. Fleet has 6, and liquor control actually has a reduction of 14.5 FTEs.
okay. That answers the question. I don't know if you wanted to comment at all, Director Madaleno, but that answers the question. Well, yes, please. Anything you want to say?
Thank you very much. For the record, Rich Madaleno, Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I think the two major changes and why you see the FTE count go up, the introduction of the flash service. While that's going to happen towards the tail end of the fiscal year, you need to hire the drivers, the mechanics, everyone ready well in advance to get that moving. So you see a bump up in transit, and then you see the headcount in fire and rescue services go up. As you probably remember, the county missed 2 recruit classes. We have 2 new recruit classes, one graduating this month, one graduating in July. And that will give us a slightly higher headcount in fire and rescue services, which conversely we hope will help reduce the overspending that we have seen in overtime expenses as we get towards a better complement to actually provide ongoing staffing for fire and rescue services.
Thank you, Director Madaleno. So the county executive has been very eloquent on the need to rethink how we do the work of government in order to reduce the growth of positions, and that as we, face headwinds fiscally, that we can't expect to continue to add positions. Can you just talk about what steps he's taking now to move forward on that important priority?
Sure. Part of it in this budget, we were trying to, on the county government side, make sure we were right-sizing several budgets. For example, one of the things I think has already been mentioned today, where you see an increase in the amount of money budgeted for overtime in fire and rescue services, because it turned out that overtime, I'm sorry that I said overtime and overtime, over space-time, as increases have been given, general wage adjustments for firefighters, that the amount budgeted for overtime, for the per hour cost of overtime, was never adjusted. So we're trying to make sure, in essence, we are properly funding overtime costs while not totally covering what they're spending in overtime this year, because we're trying to make sure that additional positions will hopefully reduce the need for overtime. The council, I believe, passed unanimously the county executive's proposal about Question A employees, and embedded in that legislation was the creation of a chief labor officer in the county executive's office. The intent of that position is to work with the variety of agencies, our partners in labor, to engage on a year-round basis on both how we control the size of government, how we control the spending in government, how we work with our frontline employees to get their advice and comments about how we improve the efficiency of government. So I think that is a task that the administration is beginning. In the first 100 days, it's hard to smartly change the focus and size of county government without doing it with a meat cleaver, and I think he's looking to do it in a smart way. We are embarking, as we've discussed, we're embarking on an outcome budgeting initiative. We are embarking on a 10-year financial plan for the county to try to figure out where we are going as a community. That is, I think, going to be not as fast as maybe everyone would like, but because the county executive has made clear he wants to engage you all of you. He wants to engage the council staff. He wants to engage the community in this conversation, so it won't be done in a black box in the EOB and then simply released as a vision. So,
Thank you. Just to conclude, I really would like to see more about the plan to focus on FTEs and right-sizing county government. And I understand that for now, it's more about expanding the number of positions to reduce overtime, that's the current proposal. But there is a big agenda that the county executives talked a lot about to reduce the number of positions, and I'm eager to see progress on that, so thank you.
and I would point out in the briefing document that your staff has prepared, it does reference, for example, the efforts the council has done in the past to make sure that certain either fire stations or pieces of equipment don't go out of service. So I think there's an interesting history within county government about the need to constrain county government, and then
the previous chair of the Public Safety Committee was very strong on that issue, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
He was, but that's a very interesting conversation to be had moving forward is what is the mission of Fire and Rescue Services and how we staff it and equip it.
Definitely. I would also like to add that I had conversations as well with the executive regarding his goal for restructuring and approximately, what is his vision or what may be some approximate targets that he has in mind, because I think that when we do talk about sustainability, we have to also take into consideration some of those goals that he has expressed, as well as our economic development strategies. And we're doing all of the above here on the council in terms of setting the stage for that, but it will be important to know if he has particular targets in mind as well as we look at the full picture. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. So, and I'm going to get to some of those points that you were talking about. But first, I just wanted to ask a simple question. Do we have a cost associated with the executive recommended? So on this chart here, we have percentages, and percentages are great. But what the actual numbers are in terms of, and I'm talking about on page 9 of our handout that you gave us at the top where it has McGeo, and it talks about the maximum cumulative payout of 9.4% for the service increments, FOP at 7%, IAFF at 5.9, and non-represented at 5.5. What are the actual costs of each of those?
We're putting those together. We'll be able to give them to you by the 23rd or earlier. But yes,
Okay.
we do have the data for that. We're putting it together right now.
Okay, because those kinds of things, with just percentages, they don't tell the full picture of what the impacts on our budget may be, and so that would be extremely helpful. And I'll take that to my next one where we talked about actual growth.
Councilmember Rice,
yes.
if you look at I believe the next chart has the total cost. I'm looking at the packet, which is on page 9.
Right, no, I'm talking about broken down by each of those individual decisions, so not a total. So I'd want to see what McGeo's line item number is, so how much does that equal? Then
so
what is
how much-
FOP? Right.
General wage adjustment.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
Exactly, so the costs associated, not the total, I saw that, but the actual individual line items of
Right,
each
so
one.
I think, for example, I think we can tell you that the McGeo compensation costs for employees from McGeo are up in the neighborhood of about 7.5%. But it's important to note that those include several things. That's the combined compensation, including wages and benefits, and it also includes new positions. And so that data we can get to you by employee group. It might take a little bit of estimation and interpolation to break those down, and so the breakdowns might be a little bit less reliable, but we can tell you dollar to dollar what the total compensation increase would be by employee group.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And again, it's the dollar figures that I'm looking at more so than the percentages, which takes me to my next point, which is when we're looking at FTEs, it's very interesting because one of the things that stands out, of course, is Montgomery College at a 21% increase, but in reality, over the course of 14 years, you're looking at about 300 positions in total. So while the percentage looks quite large, the actual number itself, and considering the fact that I think, Mr. Howard, correct me if I'm wrong, but Montgomery College pulls from every single high school. So as we look for increases in high school enrollment, you would assume, and so those trends have remained consistent to the extent, and now, you know, Montgomery College has leveled off and has started declining a little bit, but in reality, they had to add positions to accommodate for all that huge enrollment that we had within MCPS that then went to Montgomery College. But didn't we also ask Montgomery College to do things and innovate, like the biotech field that they have, cyber that they have? So we created all these brand new entities, Holy Cross Hospital and the partnership with them in health. So there's really a lot of expansion. Again, like the council president was saying, as we look at all these kinds of things that we're asking folks to do, they cost money and require us to add additional FTEs on. And so I just want to make sure that I'm not mistaking what I thought we've asked them to add on in partnership with us.
No, you are correct. The college increases certainly did not happen in a vacuum, and there's lots of new services and programs that the council has asked them to begin providing to kind of help the cohort of students who are coming through the college. And so those increases reflect that, and it also reflects kind of the catch-up after funding was reduced for the college during the Great Recession.
And thank you for that. Thank you for pointing that out. One of the other things that I wanted to make sure is that I didn't see AFSCME broken out in terms of their, because I know they're in the midst of a pre-negotiated contract at this point, correct? And so what the county executive's budget that was sent over makes the college make choices. Again, the president of the college has said that, you know, she'd only be able to go into the actual contracts and not to raise tuition or other kinds of decisions. But can we understand where we are when it comes to AFSCME and that particular contract?
Yeah, we'll have updated information for the Education and Culture Committee on the college's operating budget work session this Friday, as well as even more detail at the compensation and benefits discussion in front of the full council on the 23rd.
So to just be clear, in fact, our decisions will be ones that either jeopardize contracts that are already in existence with sitting union, AFSCME, as well as faculty's union as well, and then, or to raise tuition or have some sort of fees levied on the students. Those are the decisions that will need to be made by the Education and Culture Committee to then send over to Montgomery College in light of the $3.1 million reduction in Montgomery College's budget. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's correct. If the council is not able to fund that $3.1 million, then the college would need to either reduce the compensation amount budgeted for compensation, reduce programs or services, or increase tuition and fees.
So at the same time as we're looking to increase with the number of county government unions, we're actually looking to decrease with union that cleans the floors and cleans the bathrooms and works on maintenance for all the places of our Institute of Higher Education. Thank you. I'm very clear now. Thank you.
Councilmember Rice, I do have all those numbers for the,
Thank you, Director. I didn't ask you a question.
okay, thanks.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President Navarro, and thank you for a very good briefing. I'm glad, based on this briefing, that this is just the beginning, or I don't know if it's the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end, but of this process, because it speaks to the real challenges that we face. If ever there was an indication of our need to be deliberate and intentional and serious about the fiscal and economic challenges that we face and how those fiscal and economic challenges impact services for citizens, it's this briefing which demonstrates that we have revenues that aren't growing. And if ever there was an indication of why we need to grow the economy and generate new revenue, this is it, because the revenues coming in aren't growing, and from everything that you've indicated and everything we hear, we're not expecting them to significantly grow, at least in the near term, and our costs are growing. And unless we figure out a way to grow a private sector economy where we're increasing wages, not failing to meet our projections on income in the last 5 years as indicated here, we're never going to be able to keep up. And so I think that it's all part of a much broader conversation, not just on compensation, not just on costs, but on the fact that we are not putting ourselves in a situation to meet the needs of our citizens unless we make really serious, intentional, and deliberate decisions here. And so I appreciate the work and all of the other conversations that we've been able to have, and I hope we'll continue to have. A lot of my questions were asked. I appreciate it. I think the compensation broken down, the FTEs, was really helpful, but it would be really helpful, for me at least, to see the cost per unit, per decision. So the wage increase, the increment, I think it would just be helpful in the interest of transparency as we weigh these decisions to know exactly what everything costs, not just broken up by different unit, not just broken up by different decision, but each unit, each decision, and then a total, which would be really helpful and I think would allow us to digest it in a thoughtful way. So I appreciate Councilmember Rice and Council President Navarro mentioning that as well. Councilmember Reamer mentioned the restructuring of government. I also had some questions about it seems like about 100 new FTEs. I share the county executive's declared interest and Councilmember Reamer's declared interest, and the council president who also mentioned in restructuring government. I think you'd have partners on this side of the street in the GO committee, on the full council, in order to make some of those important decisions to modernize county services so they actually work when residents need them, so that we're positioned and poised to meet 21st century modern needs with our current expected revenues, which is not going to be an easy task, to the point of adding the positions. I'm not opposed to the idea of adding positions so we start to bring down that overtime cost, particularly in the fire service. But right now, the idea of restructuring government seems like more is less, and we need to get to a point where we start thinking about how less is more. And I hope that as we move forward, we can start thinking about right-sizing it. I understand some of the challenges in the fire service of the idea of more is less when it comes to overtime, but we need to get to a point where less is more, because we can't continue to grow the number of folks in county government if we don't have new revenues to pay for them, and if we want to be able to take care of the folks who are currently working in county government. It doesn't all work. And so I hope that the county executive and the CAO and your department, Mr. Madaleno, will really roll up your sleeves and work with us to be able to figure out how we make those decisions. So I think there's a shared interest in doing it. I think the question is how, and we'd like to see the opportunity to be able to work together on it. Just when it comes to staff, if I could ask, in addition to some of the other things that have been raised, with park and planning, the frequent conversation is this 0.8% increase. I'm concerned that it's not an increase at all. It's actually a pretty significant decrease, not just from the request, but for actual dollars. If it would be possible, as we dive into this and tackle it in more detail, if we could parse out, if you take out the personnel cost increases and the one-time move to the new headquarters and the costs associated with that, what the leftover amount is, because to me that is real service costs, and we're hearing a lot from residents who are really concerned about what impact this will have on parks that they rely on, and we are focusing on this.
Yeah, I believe it's clear that at that percentage increase, it is in fact a decrease in services. And when the Fed committee has its work session, we will have those detailed. We've been working with the agency to figure out exactly what the impact will be, so we'll have a lot of information for you then.
That'd be extremely helpful, because my understanding, just in a cursory glance over that portion of the budget, that we don't have costs funded associated with the move, that the other county agencies who are moving to the new headquarters have funded amounts as part of that move, but that park and planning doesn't. That's a concern. So if we could have more details, we don't need to discuss it here, but that would be really helpful in committee. I'd appreciate it. And with OPEB, it'd be helpful if we could get a projection of what the opportunity cost of not investing the money is for FY19, because the function of OPEB is that we're investing the money today to save money and how much it would cost later. And so it's somewhat true. I think we get into semantics a little bit here. One person's, your benefits aren't affected. I view your health care isn't affected, but your benefits are, because this is how we fund your benefits. And we can respectfully disagree on what type of semantics we use, but either way, the cost is higher. So if we are committed to funding this, which I believe we are, then the cost is more if we don't fund it now, and we ultimately have to fund it later because we're missing out on the opportunity cost of what we expect the market to provide. For the same reason of increasing debt, it's the opposite. When you increase debt, you're paying the debt service. In this case, we're missing out on the opportunity cost of making investment gains. The reality is it's basically the same, except thanks to our AAA bond rating, we get a pretty good deal on debt in terms of the interest rate and where interest rates are currently, but missing out on the market is a much higher number, in terms of the percentage expected yield based on the trust. And so it's actually a more dangerous choice than taking on more debt in terms of true costs down the line, because if you expect the portfolio to make 7% or 7.5% and our debt is closer to 2 or 3%, then that gap is a huge difference. And so I think it'd be helpful to understand not just the 89.6 million, but what does that 89.6 million mean in terms of missed investment returns and what we would actually get in terms of paying for our employees' health care. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. As every year, we are going to obviously be very busy. I would like to just offer a couple of observations. There is no doubt, when I came here in 2009, we were in the middle of a crisis, and the sky was actually falling in Montgomery County. And so, having had that experience, I must say that I don't view this budget as a significantly challenging budget. I view this budget as an opportunity for us to be able, outside of a crisis, to start really positioning ourselves to not have to deal with these constant savings plans and all of these other issues. And there are things that we're not going to be able to control, and I understand that. But this is why, I decided as council president that we should be looking at the Economic Development Corporation work, the WorkSource Montgomery work, that we should be looking at what are those innovative models out there and how can we work together with the administration to really boost this issue of economic development, because we don't have a choice. We have got to do that. It's just imperative that we do that, and we need to do it in a very, very aggressive way. At the same time, it is important that our racial equity and social justice work move ahead, because when we do talk about targeting our resources and who, really is our budget serving, we need to also be mindful of our demographics and how are we best positioning our dollars to get the best return on investment. And when we talk about outcomes, we have got to understand who we are and what the needs are, because it is very much related to our bottom line. If we don't really know how effective the programs that we have in place are in a county that has changed so dramatically for the past 30 years, in my opinion, that is also a sustainability issue that we have not necessarily been very deliberative about. So I'm really looking forward, to all of that. Also in the summer, we said we were going to engage in a careful review of our fiscal policies. And this is something that we also have to do together. All of these questions regarding how should we be leveraging these funds, our targets, the best targets, et cetera. It is a very great time for us to take a step back and just be, I think also deliberative in that review, and then figure out, where we might go. And I love the fact that there is this work on the strategic plan. This is something that the council also has been very interested in. And I particularly would like for us to have a committee that is a strategic planning committee that maybe meets quarterly to work on and understand how are we staying true to the strategic plan. So I tend to be optimistic when it comes to these types of opportunities. I think that's what our residents expect that we do, that we ask the hard questions and make the hard decisions. But I think this is an awesome new beginning to really set a different direction for the county. And I think that we have a lot to work with. So really appreciate everybody's work, team. This was an amazing work. Really appreciate you being here, Director Medalino, as well, to answer these questions. And obviously, today we'll start to hear from the public, and that will probably shape some of the things that we just said. But it's a great process. Yeah, we'll have an opinion. Well, thank you very much. We will now move on to item number 6, and this item is a briefing on the dockless e-scooter pilot program. And we will be changing chairs here with our new team coming in. Good morning. Yeah, absolutely. Councilmember Albornoz actually flagged this issue for us, and we felt it would be a good time to have a briefing about this. Really appreciate Director Rushdie for coming over to tell us a little bit about what's going on. I will like to turn it on to Councilmember Albornoz to just kind of frame it, and then, of course, we'll hear the briefing and ask questions. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to express my appreciation to you and my colleagues for your flexibility in adding this to, I know, a very tight agenda. In informal conversations with you guys and at the formal session that we had to discuss state legislation, there were some questions regarding this wonderful pilot initiative that I had the opportunity to have a conversation with representatives with DOT about a month ago in my office, and did feel that there were some questions and wanted to have a follow-up, and my colleagues expressed an interest in hearing that follow-up. And so that's the purpose of this meeting. I will say that I was not focused on this issue and appreciated the novelty and actually thought these e-scooters looked like a lot of fun to ride. It wasn't until about a month ago that I was in the District of Columbia for a meeting very close to the corner of 11th and Pennsylvania Avenue, and I was feeding money into my meter, and out of the corner of my eye, I could feel that something was awry, and there was a gentleman with ear pods holding a cup of coffee that was accelerating at an extraordinarily high rate of speed around a corner, lost control of the vehicle, and I literally had to dive out of the way to not be hit. Now, the good news is I was a goalkeeper in soccer in college, and I still got it, so that felt good. But it struck me that had I been a senior citizen or had I been my wife holding the hand of our 2-year-old daughter, there could have been a very serious injury. And of course, as we learned recently through reports in the Washington Post, the CDC is enacting a comprehensive analysis because of just how quickly these have emerged in cities across the country. As of December, they are now in 85 jurisdictions. And there, unfortunately, have also been deaths and significant increases in injuries and rises to emergency rooms. So as chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, I also had an interest in the public health component of this conversation. And I have a great deal of faith in our Department of Transportation. I really appreciate all your efforts to look at the most flexible means by which we can move our residents around in a safe and an environmentally friendly way, and looking for creative solutions to address the many traffic issues. But of course, public safety and health and wellness is an important component to that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Rushdie, to share with us your PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm sure my colleagues and I will have some follow-up questions after. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. I appreciate. And before I start, I want to share with you that as a director of Montgomery County Department of Transportation, safety of our residents is paramount. It's my job number one. And I share your concern and your thoughts. And for that reason, I think as we go through our presentation, you will see that we have gone through a very lengthy process in terms of assuring safety and also bringing this new, I would say, dockless vehicle to our county, because we're seeing that all over the country this is expanding rapidly. The topic for this presentation, by the way, many of your questions will be answered as we go through the presentation, because we will be talking, could you change? Yeah. We will be talking about personal mobility choices, and then about our pilot phasing, and of course, we will talk about the safety concerns and that you have expressed, as well as legislation that has just passed at the state level. County regulation we will talk about, and our MOU and what we are asking our contractors or vendors to do. And finally, we will talk about expansion of the system. Let me start by saying that personal mobility is in support of the county executive goals in terms of greener community, easier commute, and safe neighborhood and effective, sustainable government. Not only that, these ductless vehicles are serve our department mission and vision. And as we go through this, I'm not going to read these things because you have it in front of you, but it also answers broader needs as demonstrated by regional trend. We will talk about what's going on in some of the other jurisdictions, and you will see. We have always talked about the first and last mile to help our connecting our users to transit and employment. And the ductless vehicle and ductless bikes have played a major role. It helps us to achieve that goal. It's a broader transit access for minorities and underserved communities. We are seeing a tremendous interest in private developers and property managers. It supports the county's transportation demand management goals. It supports our climate goals because it's a zero emission vehicle. It reduces auto trips and parking demands. And finally, it's interesting that some of the larger municipalities in Montgomery County opted to join the ductless bike shares such as Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Tacoma Park. I now will turn it over to Chris to go over some of the data and the information that we have gathered to share with you.
Good morning, everybody. Just to recap something Al said, these do look like fun, but we're not doing this just for fun. We do think there are real transportation opportunities here. And as you all know, with every new opportunity, there are new risks. So we're trying to understand what those risks are and manage those risks through our approach to this program. But we did some research to understand what kind of benefits we might realize from this. So you'll see some survey results here from Baltimore City and I think also Portland, Oregon. And one of the things we were trying to understand is why are people using these scooters? And you see in this first slide, the survey results show that about 28% are using them to get around more easily or faster. As we look at the next slide, the most common reasons why people are using these are to travel for entertainment, socializing, dining, those activities that are not work, but they're the play components of a lifestyle, which is good. That's about 35%. And another 25% are using them to commute. So these are real transportation activities that are replacing other trips on our networks. One interesting finding from the Portland survey on the next slide shows what kinds of trips these are replacing. The question was, if this service hadn't been available, how would you have traveled otherwise? The first one, about 14% would have driven their own car or used a car share vehicle, and about 35% would have used some other type of automobile-oriented mobility service, taxi, Uber, or Lyft. So this survey indicates, of course we don't have data beyond the surveys yet, that these trips are replacing auto trips on the networks in these cities. How did we go about rolling this out? Well, you probably remember, even if you weren't paying attention to these details back last year, we had a dockless pilot program in Silver Spring. We had a somewhat rocky start to that with a flood of bikes into the business district that resolved itself in a matter of weeks. Once that program stabilized, we did see good outcomes of it. About 18,000 bike trips were made in the 6 months of that pilot. Most of them were within the pilot. Very few issues of them blocking access to buildings, bus stops, or other features of the sidewalk. And we saw an increase in total bike use, and we did not see a noticeable impact to the Capital Bike Share system use. These were largely trips in addition to the use of Capital Bike Share. Good support from the program. About 84% of the survey respondents said they wanted to see the program continue, but they did mention the need for more bike racks, which many have been installed in Silver Spring since this pilot, and expanded outreach and education, which is a component of our program moving forward. Just this past winter, we expanded that pilot with a vendor, Lime, who was offering e-bikes. We extended it to the North Bethesda area, We conducted 3 open houses and a series of community meetings associated with that to understand what community issues or concerns people might have. And we heard a number of them, and we've embedded them into the draft MOU that's in your packet. And that pilot was expanded and the e-bikes were added, but sadly, that pilot didn't last all that long as these companies were not seeing the profitability with e-bikes as a standalone service that they wanted to. And we had our last e-bike trip in March in the pilot area, so we haven't seen any bikes in April from that provider. We are now looking at expanding this to the 3rd phase of the pilot program, 6-month extension up to a year if it's going well. We have published a solicitation asking for letters of interest from companies that provide these services. We received a number of them. I think it was 8 or maybe more, 8. In that solicitation, we said we would select 4, and we had a preference for companies that would provide both bikes and scooters. Around the same time we were developing this letter of interest, we reached out to every sub-jurisdiction within Montgomery County, so the cities, towns, and actually some other taxing districts and smaller entities, and asked whether they would want to opt in or out of this program if we offered it. And we got a response from just about everybody, and as Al said, the largest jurisdictions wanted in, some of the smaller ones did not want to participate. And we have those all geo-fenced into the system here so that if an operator does deploy, the vehicles will not be allowed to be parked in the jurisdictions that have opted out. Doesn't mean that they can't be left there, but there'll be repercussions for the user, and the vendor will be notified that their vehicle's somewhere where it's not allowed and they'll have to go get it. The main focus, which Council Member Albornoz highlighted here, is what are the safety concerns with these devices. And I will admit I came to this from much the same place of saying, why would we introduce something new to our network that seems to have a set of unknown risks to it? And through the research that we've done, I've been convinced that it's worth giving it a try, and I'll tell you why. The scooter accidents are similar to bike accidents. The physics of the scooter are not radically different from that of a bicycle. They're operating at a similar speed. If anything, that there's a lower center of gravity to the scooter than a bicycle, so there may be less chance of injury to the operator. There's the opportunity for these to replace car trips. And if we talk about a collision on the scooter versus a collision in the car, we're talking between 10 and 40% less force in that collision, just due to the masses of the vehicle. A typical car weighing around 4,000 pounds, a typical scooter, I don't know what a typical operator weighs, but we're in the neighborhood of under 300 pounds. And if we assume they're at the same speed, we're in that 10 times to 20 times range for cars. If the cars are going faster, then we get to that 20 to 40 times range in the force. So a collision between a scooter and a pedestrian is nothing like a collision between a typical car and a pedestrian. We can build and maintain infrastructure. We complain about the state of our infrastructure, but our infrastructure in this county is really pretty good, and it's really better than a lot of other places that are operating these programs. Like Baltimore City, streets are far rougher than our own. So we have infrastructure that is suitable for these. It doesn't mean there aren't areas that aren't concerning, higher speed corridors, et cetera, but we can provide the infrastructure we need. The users have to be 16 to register for this. Of course, people can break any rule we make, and people will break this rule, but that's a matter of personal responsibility. The companies are setting up the provisions to require 16-year-old or greater operations. In the national data we've seen, the fatalities are largely at night, excepting the one in DuPont Circle, and our program will not operate in the overnight hours. The CDC study was mentioned. We're looking forward to that because that will give some conclusive evidence about what the safety implications are these, because everything we have now are small samples and anecdotal. And in Portland, innovative ideas for how to police these are emerging. Portland has come up with something innovative in that the company is fined for the misuse, and then it's up to the company to pass the fine on to the operator. We are not proposing that now, but if that's something that we think is needed, that's a model we can follow. So more data here. In Arlington County, there have been about 250,000 trips on e-scooters since they started their pilot. There have been 24 crashes. Only 3 of those were with pedestrians, and about half the crashes were people crashing the scooter on their own and not involving anybody who wasn't using the scooter. The next, in Baltimore, there were 63 emergency room visits and about 750,000 scooter trips. So again, a very low incident of injuries significant enough to draw somebody to the emergency room.
We did have the fatality in DuPont Circle. The circumstances are not entirely clear about who was at fault in that particular collision, but it is something that we are very concerned about. And then from industry, we had some data about one incident resulting in injury for every 27,000 trips. So, you know, it's not a common occurrence. It does happen, but it's not the common occurrence in scooter crashes. In terms of state legislation, we've been working very hard to get a bill passed that classifies these as bicycles. As Al said, it has passed both houses. I don't know whether it's been signed yet, but we expect that it will be. And this sets up all of the legal framework for how scooters get used in our roads without creating a new set of laws for them specifically. And they will be required to follow all the traffic rules under that. In terms of the current county regulations, our law does not allow a motorized vehicle, including an e-bike, on sidewalks. Scooters being classified as bicycles, or even if they're not, if they're a motor vehicle, they will not be allowed to be used on our sidewalks unless we act otherwise. And there may be reason to act otherwise, but we're not proposing that now. And then our county MOU reiterates that they must follow those laws and goes into a lot of other safety requirements. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gary, who's managing the program for us, to talk specifically about what those requirements are.
Yeah, thank you. So we manage the program through an MOU. A draft MOU is in your packet, and we released that to the public on our website. We got comments back from vendors, those 8 vendors that Chris talked about. We're in the process of, we also responded to those questions on the website, and we are in the process of relooking at our MOU to add different provisions that have come from some of those questions. Some of the policies that we found is that, like what Chris had talked about, we had an e-bike program, but there were no e-bikes for the last few months. So if you're going to have a program, people need to know the bikes are available and where they're at. So we are talking about, when we advance this pilot phase 3, to have a minimum number of vehicles being available pretty much at all time, and also a maximum. This is consistent with what's going on in the region. And again, it depends on the area that we're talking about ultimately, and obviously based on the area and the size. But we're talking about the concept of a minimum and a maximum. Then the question comes in, when do you increase? When can you change? And again, this is based on some national experience with jurisdictions. If the vehicles are being used, fully being used, then they can make an argument that we need to add more vehicles. And so we would look at the responsiveness of the vendor. And there are some standards that we're proposing. For your information, the Parks Department, we're not proposing or suggesting regulations or a program for parks. Parks is actually investigating it themselves. Next slide. In terms of vendor responsibilities, again, these are mostly laid out, but I'd like to just highlight a few things. Like with the current pilots, previous pilots, there's insurance requirements where we're additionally insured. And in fact, we've been told that actually our insurance requirements are slightly higher than others in the region. There's a performance bond, and this really relates to a couple things. If we have to tow vehicles, or we have to move vehicles, or there is some concern of damage, then if the company does not do the right thing, then we have the ability to claim on their performance bond. Monthly reporting is very important. We need data, obviously. You need data on safety, you need data on trips. We need to know how this is improving air quality, sustainability, and the other things that Al talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And so because there is some standards now, there weren't initially, now there's standards on how data gets reported, that we're looking at the national standards, and we would be using a third party that would be collecting the data and analyzing it and mapping it out so that we can then check where they're at, where the trips are going, what distribution there is within the county. A couple of things that are really important that the public has said is how responsive are these vendors to concerns and crisis. So the MOU established certain times
But typically, the companies are telling us that they staff up to be able to respond within 2 hours. So if there is a parking violation that is not urgent, that has to be solved instantly, then, you know, they're told about it, then they have a period of time which they have to respond. During the state legislative session that Chris talked about, getting some legislation passed, we've had a couple very productive discussions with the disability community, particularly the visually impaired. And they're concerned that if a vehicle is misparked, maybe crossing a sidewalk, and they need to contact somebody to get it moved, how do you know whose vehicle it is and what the contact is? We are the first, I think, probably in the country to require some sort of embossed printing, tactile logo that would explain contact information, website, phone numbers. So this is an experiment on our part that I'm sure will be watched. The companies have obviously they like to push back on that because it's something new, but it's something we are going to require. And the other issue that I think was very successful with the pedal bikes and the e-bikes is that when you have a lot of bikes, that you don't want them all in the same block. You don't want them all blocking the same storefront. And so we set up at the beginning of the first pilot, you can't have more than 3 of these vehicles by company on any block face. So depending on how many companies you have, that's how many you could have there. The nuance here is that, you know, the scooters, maybe you may not know this, but the scooters, you know, are positioned in the morning, maybe 6 in the morning, and they're picked up at night at dark because the companies have to recharge them. And so where they're placed in the morning is pretty critical. And so we want to work with the companies to know and identify locations so that they're not creating a problem. So that's where we really want to kind of work with the company. And we have parking policies. We kind of referred to them where they can be. It's a continuation of the current policy in the MOU, only in public right-of-way, bike parking areas, designated areas, sidewalks. They cannot impede pedestrian movement. They can't block fire hydrants. They can't block or interfere with street furniture, bus stops, interfere with traffic. Again, that's why the vendor would then be called and have to move them, or quite frankly, the scooters, maybe unlike bicycles, may be easier to move. If someone just sees them, they certainly are welcome and encouraged to move them and put them where they belong. So we also want to, on this slide, in the picture if you can see, for the pedal bikes and for the e-bikes, we've created a couple of these preferred parking areas. They were used by the vendors, but not necessarily used by the user. We wanted them to park the bikes back in those places because those were congested areas. So we're going to continue to work with the vendor on those preferred parking areas. And the county does have the authority at the vendor expense to move the dockless vehicles if they are creating problems and under special emergency. So one of the highlights of any program is going to be how responsive are we going to be to the customers, to the public. And we've developed a pretty good system, I think, near the end of after the first month or two of a rough end on our side of getting lots of complaints. We've developed a pretty good system of using 311 and Sandy Brecker's group, Commuter Services, which are out promoting alternative vehicles. So we're asking each of these companies, and they all do. They have websites, they have information, they have apps, and we want to get that information out. One of the things that I didn't mention, which I think is important, is that we're asking that each of the companies have public education programs. And if you go to any of these companies' websites, they all have how to use, how to ride, how to be safe, how to wear a helmet. All the companies say that can't be ridden on sidewalks. All different companies have different age limits, whether it's 16 or 18. Many of the companies require a picture of your driver's license. So there is a way that they're trying to regulate who can use these. And because they know who rented and they know where the bikes are, If there are violations, they can get back to the renter, and they can either fine them if they parked in one of these jurisdictions they're not allowed to park, or if they have parking problems. And they have public education. One of the things that we would do as a department, as we do with bicycles today, is that we would have regularly planned locations where people can try to ride these for free. Get an experience in a safe area, a parking lot, and without cars parked, and ride. And we have the companies come in and do that. And we would initially sponsor them, but we would hope the companies would also take the initiative to do that on their own.
One other thing I'd like to mention before we open for your questions is we did work with police while we were getting the responses here to understand some of their concerns, and their main concern was that we get too much going on in any one place. So we have agreed that we would deploy certain providers in certain locations so that we don't have all of the scooters ending up in the same area. We can understand the performance of the companies individually better that way, and they'll have a better handle on where to pay attention to where these are in service and keep an eye on their operation.
All right, thank you. Let's see, we have Councilman Albornoz.
Thank you. Great presentation. You absolutely answered many of my questions, and I knew that you had given a lot of thought to this, but this helped sort of highlight some of the questions and concerns that I had. I did have a few follow-up questions. So are they permitted on the sidewalks in the District of Columbia currently or not?
Yes and no. So in the downtown area, they're not. Outside the downtown area, we understand they are.
Okay, because I think it's a good thing that they won't be permitted on sidewalks in Montgomery County, because that alleviates some of the ambiguity. But because many residents may be riding on them and in DC and then coming over here and the same rules won't apply, if there's a mechanism maybe where we have the stations that we can make very crystal clear that they're not permitted on sidewalks, I think that would help.
Actually, one of the things that I asked Chris to make a note of in our MOU is that the companies, vendors, actually get a consent from the users that in Montgomery County they are not allowed to ride on the sidewalk, regardless of which street, what road, and where. So that actually pushes the fact that we don't want these vehicles, not either electric bikes either. They should not be in our sidewalks. I think the speed is too fast. Our sidewalks in some cases are narrow. And I felt that for the safety of our pedestrian, we cannot allow these vehicles to be on the sidewalk.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And while I respect that we're requiring the companies to ensure a public education process, they of course don't know our public as well as we do. And so I think forging a very intentional partnership and alliance through our civic associations, citizens advisory boards, all the same mechanisms we're using around Vision Zero, I think will be very important. And I did have the opportunity to meet with representatives from the traffic division of MCPD, and they acknowledged the great partnership with DOT, but they did express major reservation about this and significant concern that we're just going to brace ourselves and see what happens, which didn't leave me feeling very good. And I know we're trying to address as many provisions on the front end as possible, but you know, they're obviously the experts out in the field with regards to what's currently going on today, and that didn't leave me feeling very comfortable.
Yeah, as Chris mentioned, I had a meeting with Chief Manger and his deputy, and actually Captain Didon as well, and we did talk about implementation of e-scooters on our county network, and we both agreed that we are not going to just fill the whole county. We're going to go a little bit slower. During our pilot area, we're going to limit number of scooters and so forth. So we had that conversation, and I think at the end we both felt comfortable that this is something they can move forward with.
And we do have the option to terminate at any time if we're finding we're having a problem with a particular provider or in general with this system.
Great. Our bike master plan is obviously going to put us in an even better position than other jurisdictions because we're taking into account. But I do want to acknowledge there's I wouldn't say it's apples and oranges, but there is a difference between bicycles and even e-bicycles and these scooters, because the depth and how large they are, the presence that they provide on a street, obviously nothing compared to a car, but there's still a greater presence when you're on a bicycle versus when you're on one of these things, because their circumference is so small. And 20 miles per hour, which is the top speed as is currently within the MOU, is actually, that's what it says in the MOU here, that it can go up to 20. But I wanted to confirm that that was accurate, because I do think calibrating them so that they can't exceed more than 15, I think makes more sense.
That was my understanding, and I will make sure that we limit those on our county roads at 15 miles per hour.
And then I just have two requests. So, and it is clear that you, at least two requests. It is clear that you've applied many of the lessons learned from the e-bike share, because I can see it in the MOU, particularly with regards to the responsiveness of the collection of the vehicles themselves. But, and there is a requirement for them to report out crashes. I would like to go one step further than that and partner with our emergency rooms, because as the CDC report indicates, many of the crashes, and particularly the pedestrians that are hit by these, are going unreported. And so there's an underreportment. The other thing, and I think the CDC report will be very helpful in having us administer additional policies. Right now, as an example, they're likely going to recommend that only one person per vehicle is allowed. I've been in DC again many times recently and have seen as many as, two people or a parent and a child riding these things together, which seems like a really bad idea. So that that provision will be important. And then driving these vehicles while impaired also causes some concern. I heard your comment regarding there being more incidents in the evening. Actually, the reports we've read so far is they occur all day. It's not just in the evening, but obviously when you add alcohol or any other sort of substance on top of impairment, then that's a recipe for disaster. And so that's something that, and I appreciate shutting them off after a certain hour. I think that will help address many of those specific issues. And then the development that's going on in Bethesda and Silver Spring right now, which is creating lots of unusual traffic patterns as we adjust to the development of the new Marriott building, just as one example, I think it's something we have to pay close attention to, because people are struggling to walk, let alone ride one of these e-scooters in some of these areas. And so to the degree to which we can offer some support or signage in areas where we know we're going to have a problem, I think would be important as well.
Actually, we are not planning to employ in Bethesda at this time during this initial pilot.
Right.
So we are mindful of all the construction and the sidewalks that are blocked and all the other challenges we have in downtown Bethesda.
Right. All right, I think that's it for now. There's other lights. Thanks.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. So let me first start off by saying that I'm a big fan of these scooters. I hadn't seen them until I went on a college visit with my daughter to Ohio State University. And the reason why I saw them is because I saw them littered all over the sidewalks there. And it was interesting because I said, what in the world are these things? And I thought for a moment that it was like one of those tours that happens where you rent Segways and everybody's on their Segways. And I thought, oh, this is a new tour thing. And then as I saw them around on campus and wherever, and continued to see them just littered about, whether it was the scooters or the e-bikes. And so, there's great documentation about Ohio State and some of the new regulations that they've put forth as a result. A huge university who, again, I think they're great. It's just about how to manage and regulate them is a tremendous concern. And when you look at what happened in San Francisco, and so this spring break, I'll be able to report to you as I go to Sacramento and tour UC Davis, that I'll be able to report to you on what's happening in Sacramento, who's also looking at this right now and evaluating, and be able to give you some direct feedback with, a community who's, really at the forefront of trying to move this technology forward and seeing what some of the pitfalls and some of the great things as a result. But one of the things in California that struck me that was very interesting that I haven't heard us talk about, because you talked about it at the beginning when you talked about accessibility. And the reality is that with all of the apps, and I've got them on my phone, they all require a credit card. And oftentimes our people who are immigrants, our people who are of lower socioeconomic status don't have credit cards. And so from that perspective, you're actually keeping out some of the folks who may be able to utilize this technology most, the very people who you talked about you're trying to reach. And I know in some areas they've actually put, and California is looking at this and putting and saying that you have to have another means of allowing people to pay beyond credit cards. So have you had that conversation with vendors?
Actually, as you recall, when we started Capital Bike Share, we were mindful of that same situation. And in regards to our e-scooters, I'm going to ask Gary to give you an update on where we are on that.
Yeah, we have the MC Liberty program, and that actually was the start of our Capital Bike Share program for a grant we got to do that. And that still continues. So most of the companies do offer programs. That was one of the questions we were asking them, that have an alternative to using a credit card. So either you go to a CVS or something and get a code, and then you punch the code into the unlocking mechanism. We also have the ability through our trip store and our mobile commuter store to also work with the vendors to provide some alternative ways to ride these. Some also offer half price to get started on the first trip.
So I think it'll be really important for us to make sure that that's visible. Like I said, I'm on Bird's site right now, and it's not. Same with Lime. And so from that perspective, it really will be one of those where, again, they'll need to make sure that that's out there as we talk about our equity policy, right? I'm telling you, Council President, you have made me a different legislator as a result of this, because I'm always thinking about those things and making sure that they are there. So again, we'll need to make sure that that's out front. So thank you for that, and thank you for your continued commitment on that. So let's talk about safety. We've talked about pedestrians who are dealing with these vehicles that will now be on the road. I'm curious as to what our conversation about helmets is and what the word should means. Coming from Annapolis, as a legislator, should is a very weak word, and so from that perspective, I'm really concerned about the fact of that, when we give out skateboards at any of our parks, we require that you have a helmet. I think that when you're talking about, we can continue to argue about whether or not for bicycles, but I can tell you that the majority of children that we talk about, especially under age of 18, we're always telling them that they should have helmets. We talk about that in bicycle safety, right? So when you're talking about a motorized vehicle like this, and you are talking about people who are 16, understanding that, again, brain injury, 52% reduction in serious brain injury with a helmet, 44% reduction in death, possibility of death, while wearing a helmet. This is a motorized vehicle, 15 to 20 miles an hour in traffic. And that's the other thing. So potential of getting hit by a car is much higher than if you're on a sidewalk. Are we going to mandate helmet usage for these vehicles?
You are right. We would certainly like every user to use a helmet, though helmet laws that pertain to bicycles will pertain to the use of these. So there's no additional provision in law or in our MOU for that, and it is a huge barrier to get people to using them. So it's a trade-off that is really uncomfortable and has been in place with bicycle share and these systems.
Yeah, I would just say that the difference is, again, you're talking about a motorized vehicle and talking about in traffic. So it's a very different scenario. You know, the sidewalk, and I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Conklin. I've got tremendous respect for you in terms of, and you know this, I'm not just saying this, in terms of safety. But this is one where I think we're really going to have to rethink this. All it's going to take is one subdural hematoma from somebody who's fallen, you know, and it changes there. So I think from that, we really need to give some thought to what it is. Others are doing it. California's looking at it right now. Other jurisdictions are looking at it as well, at least under the age of 18, right? So even if we were to just say, look, if you're under 18, that 16 to 18 framework, and just say must. And we know that there will be people who won't follow the law. I understand that, but at least it'll give us some teeth to really start encouraging people to utilize them, right? Because we know how difficult it is. And I just think about, you know, I'll just close with this. My daughter, both of my daughters who have electric scooters, and we require that they wear a helmet. And then she got one of those little scooters that you ride on that looks like a little mini Vespa. And again, and she hates it. She's like, I look stupid wearing a helmet. And I said, yeah, well, just think about, how you'd feel if you got hit by a car, and would you feel stupid then? So, I mean, it's really one of those where, again, it's about making sure that we're trying to do the best to protect our community, understanding that, again, if they were on the sidewalk, it'd be a different story. But then being in mixed traffic, there's higher risk of a serious incident with a thousands of pound vehicle. And from that standpoint, we want to give them as much protection as
I
possible.
appreciate your suggestion. Thank you.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Good discussion. Appreciate the hard work you've put into this program, and really you have a very thorough understanding of all of the different aspects of implementing this program, and you've been responsive to a lot of different concerns that are out there, and we're still in our early stages of understanding what this could mean. I think this is a revolution in urban mobility, and Montgomery County, as a community that does have urban areas, does not want to be left out of what is happening in this country and the region, in the world around us. I think that people know that you can get this quality of life, that you can have these types of choices in other communities, and it's a reflection, it's a statement about a community when you don't have them. I worry a little bit for Bethesda not having access to the pilot, but as it becomes deployed in Silver Spring and Tacoma Park, and perhaps people will start to say, why not me too? But I think that the fact that we're moving forward with it is really important. I totally understand the concerns about injury. And the reality is these are a lot like bicycles. And probably nobody knows better than me about getting injured on bicycles up sitting on this dais, because unfortunately I'm far too practiced at that. But, the reality is if you move with any type of speed, and that's literally also including walking, there's a risk of injury. The second you start moving, you have energy in your body, and you can trip, you can fall, you can crash, you can be hit by someone else. The only thing worse than that probably is not moving, staying in your bed, staying at your house. That's worse. So we have to embrace the reality that people need choices in mobility. The fact that 50% of these trips are trips that would otherwise be in vehicles, that's huge. I didn't know that. I wondered if maybe a lot of these weren't people who would have biked otherwise, but the fact that they're trips that would otherwise be in vehicles, this is really significant. Uber and Lyft are choking our streets with cars. They've incentivized people to just drive around trolling for fares, blocking up our roads, causing crashes, hitting pedestrians, hitting bikers, and this is actually moving against that trend. It's not it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. We know from physics every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That applies to these vehicles, but I think we ought to look at them as we do bikes, and we should allow them where bikes are allowed, and kind of embrace them philosophically. I think it's really exciting that we are moving forward with our protected bike lane networks, which I think will become much more valuable than we knew that they would be when we started to plan them. When we started to plan them, they were just for bikes. Now we have the opportunity to have them established where people can because you can use those lanes in a scooter, right? That is a provision.
Yes,
that we're-
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so you can be buffered from cars. But there's going to be a learning process there, how scooters and bikes interact. That's going to be a whole thing we're going to hear about. But I think it's notable. When we had the Economic Development Corporation here 2 weeks ago, they talked about the fact that you can get scooters in Montgomery County. They were a little ahead of us there, but as we think about trying to fill up the Discovery headquarters, we're trying to attract 40, 50 companies probably to fill that building. It says a lot when a prospective tenant is walking around Silver Spring and they see life, they see arts, they see culture, they see mobility choices. That's the modern urban environment. And it will help them know that their employees have access to the same amenities, the same lifestyles, the same choices in Montgomery County that they can get in DC or Northern Virginia or other parts of the country for that matter. So while being mindful for safety, while being very intentional about public education, and I worked with you to sponsor that town hall we did with the dockless bike pilot. It was absolutely necessary. We needed a chance to hear from people, to let people share their concerns, and to start educating a little bit more effectively. This is part of the process. This discussion today is part of the process. There has to be mitigation and concerns raised. But at the same time, I think we do need to embrace the future of mobility in Montgomery County and see where this could go. What about one day shutting down downtowns to vehicles? That's something that people dream about in the urban planning world. You're never going to be able to do that without choices like this, So I'm glad we're proceeding, and I will be watching closely, and I really appreciate your work. I think the concerns that have been raised are significant. We've all had near misses from different types of vehicles. I had one recently from a car coming out of a parking garage. I was walking. A car almost ran into me. This is part of our daily lives. We have to be careful, but we do need to educate scooter users about safety. So that's going to be really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando, please.
Thank you, Council Vice President. It's the first time I've been able to say that. That you've kicked it to me, so that's exciting.
Well, she was only 2 steps away. I mean, I was close. I was glad he was finished. I really.
We barely got in. Thank you for the presentation. It's very helpful. So, I too, the first half of your presentation is really exciting, right? All the stats around why people are using them, how they deferred car usage, ride sharing. And those are all good things, and I think bode well for long-term accessibility, multimodal transportation, and equity for different people and low-income folks. So a whole bunch of positives there. But I do share some concerns, obviously, that you've heard here around safety. And just a couple questions, and then I wanted to reference the study, the Los Angeles study, which I'm sure you guys have looked at. I think it was in the Post in January, is the article I read, which kind of seemed to maybe contradict is a strong word, but not necessarily align with your presentation. So your top bullet for safety was scooters accidents are similar to bicycle accidents. Though basically the main point of this study, which was a 1-year period study in LA, was that they're not similar to bicycle accidents, and there's more, and they're more severe. And so I just wanted to know, could you talk about that, and because that's kind of a basic assumption that's kind of at the heart of the safety issue, is are the accidents and injuries similar to bicycles, or they're not? And it seemed to be some conflicting information on that.
Actually, the level of information we have is kind of what we presented. I mean, we were talking to Arlington and Baltimore, which have done analyses. We can go back to them and ask, can you give us your similar statistics for bicycles?
And how long of a period were they looking at?
These were 6 months. These were
Okay.
6 months. Both of them were 6 months, most recently. But the numbers are, one of the things you might extrapolate from what we had presented for Baltimore. They have less than 2,000 scooters, and they are carrying over 40,000 trips a week.
On less than 2,000.
2,000 scooters.
Do we know how many people that is?
Actually, we could go back and look. Okay. Because, obviously they're repeat users, but there are a lot of new people as well. I mean, in our limited first pilot, there were many thousands of people that tried the bikes in Silver Spring. But yeah, I mean, I think we could go back and look at the data a little more.
And look at the LA study. That was a 1-year period. And
Right.
again, it was like, they said the ER visits were higher than bicycle or pedestrian or walkers, and that they were more severe. And that's just something I think we need to be tracking, especially as we embark on a pilot ourselves and look at the best data and research available, because that's significant. Obviously, the CDC is going to do their work, but we need to do ours. Just to confirm, these will not be allowed on sidewalks. That's correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And I think we need to stick to that. These are, again, Councilman Rice and others have brought this up. These are motorized vehicles, they're not bikes. They're similar but different in that you don't have to pump your legs. Go ahead, you wanted to say something.
Well, whichever county council developed the current law must have seen this coming because they exactly prescribed the difference between a powered bicycle and a non-powered bicycle. So they were, what's the word? I can't think of the right word. Pressured.
Our visionary forebears. That's great. The helmet law. My understanding is that California does have a law requiring helmet for these vehicles, for these e-scooters. And just to confirm, your position is that would not be a good thing?
I don't think we said that.
Okay, maybe I misheard.
The current law does not require helmet, and I think under 16, yeah. And the thing is, in other neighboring jurisdiction, that these scooters and e-bikes are being used, they're not required to be wearing helmet. So it's something that we have to work with the vendors and see if there is a change in the overall attitude toward these vehicles, and so we go from there. But right now, it is not illegal to ride a e-scooter or e-bicycle on the street without helmet.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to add is that we offer helmets for Capital Bike Share. We again encourage the low income, I guess, get them for free. So the people that are in our MC Liberty program, we mail them out for free. Each of these companies really want you to wear helmets. I mean, their own reasons why. It's a good policy. And they offer discount also on helmets.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether they offer free or not, but they offer significant discount on the helmets, and they encourage it. So I think the question that was raised about getting a consent from users not to run on sidewalks, we could probably look at, see what kind of consent that they should be wearing helmets as well. But that doesn't get them to put the helmet on.
Right. Well, I mean, look, people are going to do what they're going to do, but I think us sending a signal that these are required, it's an important safety measure, and recognizing the difference between e-scooters and bicycles. If we're highly encouraging it for bicycles, I think we should be requiring it for e-scooters. I just think that makes sense. And the other question, it was a good segue, you said about the companies. You mentioned that many of them require driver's licenses to sign in. Is that correct?
Yes, once you set up an account with that company, they want you to take a picture on your phone and send the driver's license.
So another recommendation I'd have is, if you know right now, great, who are the companies that require that? And let's use those vendors. Let's not use the ones that don't require it. I think any way we can try to enforce the rules that the companies have themselves that we think are going to help with safety. So it sounds like there was a difference between some do, some don't. Can you answer that today? Do you know which ones we're using and which ones don't require that?
I would have to look into it.
Okay. Well, that would be another suggestion. But overall, I think, look, we're going to get some data here. I think we proceed with caution. literally and figuratively. And hopefully we can make sure people are using these safely. So thank you for the presentation.
Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. It's really been enlightening. All right, so can you literally walk me through, and not that I'm going to be the person that's going to rent these, but maybe I would if they're easy enough. All right, how do I go about it? I see the scooters on. My wife is listening maybe, and I'm not going to ride a bicycle, but anyhow, so I see a scooter in the docking areas or the dockless areas, and so I walk over and say, okay, I'm considering doing this. What happens then?
There's actually a video on all the companies, but like Lime or Bird, you could go and do that. But this is what you do, and they actually show you. You have to go to their mobile app and sign in, and obviously you have to certify certain things. Give them your credit card, maybe a picture of your driver's license as well, and then. With that information, you can take a picture of the GPS unit, lock unit on the I'll take a picture of the scooter, QR code, and it would unlock the scooter for you, and then you're off. And then when you finish, you have to then close the trip on your app.
All right, and then if I stop in a way, certainly for a healthy lunch or whatever I'd be doing, if I stop on the way, then I come out, and then I just start it again. Is that
No, you would hopefully, you probably don't want to pay for the scooter rental while you're having lunch.
So it's by the minute or
yes,
whatever
it's
it is,
by
the
minute.
time.
And typically, they're like $1.50 to start the trip, and some percent, some increment per minute. I don't know if it's 15 or 25 cents per minute. So I mean, and these trips typically are 10, 15 minutes. No one is taking them really a long distance. You could. There's a range of 20 or 30 miles on these things if you want, and some people have, in fact, seen how far they can go, and you pay by the minute. So typically, I know my son in Austin, Texas uses them, and he sends me an email he gets afterwards on how far he went, how fast he went, how many calories or whatever, how many emissions he saved by doing that. And his trips are $2-3, So it's cheaper than using an Uber or Lyft. And in fact, that's one of the motivations why they're in the business, because they don't want their drivers of cars to actually make these short trips. They're not making money. They'd rather have you link to the first mile, last mile on a scooter.
All right, so, and that's all helpful, and you answered a few of my other questions along the way there. But so if I stop for lunch, then I need to go and put it back in a dockless area? How does that work? No, just leave it?
Well, you would hopefully leave it in a safe parking area. On the right, on the right, in the right of way, on the sidewalk, that was enough room that would not block anybody or a wheelchair or an entrance.
So you can
You just
park
drop
them,
it. You just park it where you finished your trip.
but you can park it on a sidewalk. You can't ride it on the sidewalk.
Right, you have to take it off the sidewalk.
And is there a GPS in there? How does the company know where I left my scooter?
They have a GPS, and in fact, that's the reason we see all of these new technologies, all these new revolutionary mobility options, because of the technology of the GPS. So it knows where you went, it tracks you, and in fact, that's the type of information we get anonymized. We don't get anonymous, but we can get all of the routes that people take. By time of day, by day of week, and so it helps us with our planning of our infrastructure to know where these people are taking the trip. So they know exactly within the accuracy of the unit, which may be 25 yards or 25 feet, where you're at.
And the idea that it's not going to be in the ag reserve, well, obviously they're not going to rent too many in the ag reserve, so I know that the company wouldn't want to put any there, but so if someone rode it or took it or whatever they did to the ag reserve, they would know that and know that they had to go retrieve it.
If the person didn't take it back out of the ag reserve in a period of time, they would say, yeah, because these scooters, and again, some people think this is a real advantage of the scooters, is they're picked up every night. Someone finds that scooter, gets paid to find the scooter, take it to their property and charge them, and then put them back at a defined location where they need to be.
There is a geofencing, and when you go outside in the area that you are not supposed to be going, so when you want to close the session, it actually tells you, and you get fined because they have to go and pick it up. So, and then in terms of your question about going to a restaurant, you don't want to pay by minute when you are sitting and eating lunch. So you basically lock it out and finish that session, and then, of course, when you come out of lunch, you can pick it up and go back to your office.
Or someone else could pick it up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
So
course,
that one
you
might have to go look for another one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to double down on a lot of the comments my colleagues have made about the importance of public education. We already have we already have too many incidents related to bicycles and some of the other transportation vehicles that are already allowed, and adding this to the mix. We not only need to educate the users, as has been suggested, but also the general population. And to that end, my one question is, a car, a bicycle, and an e-scooter all enter a lane. The pause. They all enter a road, a lane. What's the priority? What is any one of those users supposed to understand when the convergence happens?
I think under the current state law, I believe the bicycle and the scooter have parity with each other, and they would need to follow each other like any two similar vehicles under the state motor vehicle ordinances. And the provisions about the motor vehicle or car yielding or providing shy space to the bicycle and e-scooter would apply. And if it's a multi-lane road, there's requirements that the bicycle and the e-scooter be in the rightmost lane unless they're planning to turn left. So all the provisions that are already in the state motor vehicle laws would apply to that scenario. But I don't think there's a difference between the powered bike and the non-powered bike, and one having
And then what about the
right-of-way
vehicle?
over the other.
And that parity compared to the vehicle?
They are both have the right-of-way over the car in terms of the shy distances and other provisions that relate between cars and bicycles.
And I'll refer back to my opening statement about public education and the importance of that.
Right.
Thank you.
Then I agree more with what you said. And actually, I think part of our, because of the safety, and we will be doing a lot of public outreach. We will be talking to some of the commissions and groups, and we will go with our vendors and make a presentation. And you're absolutely right. Many drivers today on our road don't understand the law as it pertains to the bicyclists and those who are on those vehicles.
Well, thank you so much for this briefing. It is so important for us to understand and for the public to understand. And, on the one hand, we know that these types of modalities are very attractive and they're coming. And so just having all of these provisions, it's really, I think, strikes the balance that I'm sure we will continue to monitor. So really do appreciate all the work that has gone into getting us to this point. All right, so item 7, I'd like to propose a closed session to consider matters that concern the proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state pursuant to Maryland Code General Provision Article 3-305A4. Topic is retention of a business in the county. Moved by Councilmember Reamer. Second by Council Vice President Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. We will go to the third floor conference room, and we'll be back here at 1:30 for our public hearings. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing on the FY20 proposed operating budget and proposed amendments to the FY19 to 24 capital improvements program and the FY20 to 25 public services program and fiscal policy for the following: Montgomery County Government, Montgomery College, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, and Montgomery County Public Schools. Council committees will conduct work sessions on the budgets over the next 3.5 weeks, beginning on Thursday, April 11th. Full council work sessions will begin in May. The committee schedule is available on the council's website. For everyone scheduled to testify, please bring copies of your written testimony to the clerk at this time. And before beginning your presentation, please state your name clearly for the record. For Group A, we have Jean Dinwiddie, Jason Yang, Georgette Godwin, Jane Whitaker, Laura Irwin, and Suzanne Jenkins. Okay, we'll start with Jean Dinwiddie. Yes. Please press the button, yes, at the base of the microphone. There
Thank
you
you. Hi, I'm Jean Dinwiddie, and I'm Chair of the Commission on Aging. Our FY20 priorities are intended to fight social isolation and promote safe, affordable living for older adults. They include recommendations for recreation, health, and social service programs, and affordable housing expansion and preservation. So to summarize, we are very concerned about the continued cuts to the funding for the Department of Recreation. The recreational programs at senior and community centers can include healthy meals, social engagement, and intellectual stimulation, all essential for older adults who might otherwise be isolated and alone, and especially important for older adults in diverse communities who have unique challenges of social isolation. We also wish to highlight some priority items that the Commission requested and that are not reflected in the current budget proposal. So first and foremost is for funding an additional social worker position for the public guardianship program. The public guardianship program, along with adult protective services, is overloaded and understaffed. August of 2018 saw the highest caseload in APS history with 119 open cases. So another social worker position is desperately needed there. We'd also request increases in rates and services for the respite program. We join with the Commission on People with Disabilities in seeking an increase in funding for respite services so that we can avoid service cuts while bringing the direct workers up to the county's minimum wage. Additional requests include a coordinator of outreach and support to older adults in diverse communities, senior center early memory loss programs called the Senior Center Plus programs. We'd ask that you preserve and expand affordable housing options. So the Commission on Aging understands the need for strategic fiscal management in uncertain times, and we appreciate the county executives and the county council's commitment to serving the needs of older adults. With the number of county residents 60 years of age and older increasing so close, by approximately 10,000 each year and becoming increasingly diverse, the county must continue to support critical programs that permit all older adults to live safely in their homes and communities and to enjoy a high quality of life regardless of income. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Yang.
Jason Yang. Good afternoon. I'm here today on behalf of the Western Montgomery County Citizens Advisory Board to offer our recommendations for the upcoming county operating budget. We realize the challenges facing the county and truly appreciate your leadership and efforts to bring everyone together on a difficult budget. As business, resident, and nonprofit representatives of the BCC region, our top 5 priorities are traffic and transportation, affordable housing, live, work, play communities, economic development, and schools. As we're acutely aware, traffic in the area has become near unbearable, and more importantly, unsustainable. A functioning transportation network requires adequate funding for not just roads and mass transit, but also additional multimodal efforts such as bicycle, pedestrian, and last mile connectivity to bridge the gaps within our neighborhoods. We need improvements in the efficiency of traffic movement through better signalization, synchronization, and planning. Pedestrian safety improvements are definitely needed, especially in urbanizing centers. The explosion of construction has closed streets and sidewalks, severely compromising access and safety. While the swell of luxury housing may bring forced MPDUs, the county needs to continue to focus on preserving existing naturally affordable housing. Adequate housing for middle incomes as well as those with disability is much needed, especially in metro areas where housing costs tend to skyrocket with development. As our urban centers continue to grow, we need housing, activities, and amenities that are available to different income levels and needs to better preserve balance within the community. The more we can develop housing and employment opportunities near each other, along with recreational amenities, the less time our residents will spend in their cars. Live, work, play communities support quality of life by meeting those needs in close proximity to each other. It is quite common to hear that Montgomery County is an unfriendly place to do business. While we applaud recent efforts to improve not just this image, but actual programs and endeavors to break through the stigma, we must grow our business and economy and not rely solely on the backs of our residents with increased property values and taxes. A better balance must be struck between the housing market and jobs. And while we have seen recent strides in improving the permitting system, the efficiency and predictability can and must be better. As student enrollment continues to outpace capacity, growing operational needs must be addressed to keep our quality education. The county must stand up and advocate for our fair share of school funding from the state, for example, via the Kerwin Commission and casino funds. MCPS needs to operate in good faith and with much needed transparency, participating in the open data platform as a start. Enrollment forecasting methodology needs to be severely scrutinized and honed to more accurately portray the growing student body needs. Thank you for taking your valuable time to listen to our community which you serve. We're excited at the possibilities. Please take this opportunity to lead us in growth and truly make a difference, not just for your citizens now, but for generations to come.
Thank you so much. Can you both please turn off your microphones when you're finished? Thank you so much. Gigi Godwin.
Thank you. I'm Gigi Godwin, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and this is the first time I am testifying before this new county council, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. After all, you are considering an important budget, and for the first time as a collective group. This is an exciting opportunity and an important responsibility. I'm here to represent the members of the chamber, and I want you to know how diverse they are. They are one-person companies to companies that employ tens of thousands of employees. They're diverse. They are government contractors. They are in hospitality. They're builders and contractors, financial services, so many other areas. And they are local to global. The smallest and the largest companies are regionally competitive in a globally connected economy. Our members are doing incredible things, incredible, exciting work. They are building blockchain technology and artificial intelligence right here in Montgomery County. They are curing cancer. They're saving the planet. Just ask them, they'll tell you. And they're creating new ideas for placemaking and building where all of these things are happening. All of them are employers who contribute to the well-being of our residents and to our economic vitality. This is why we're here today. Your operating budget must drive us toward a shared vision for the 21st century community that will attract the talent and the employers we need for that talent to solve the global challenges that they're working on and that we care about and we want to be the home of. That is our shared vision for this community. So what is keeping our members up at night? Attraction and retention of talent. And what are the obstacles? As has been said, transportation congestion, high cost of housing for the next generation of talent. And we need more critical mass of employers, of companies who hire that talent in all of our strategic industry objectives, cyber, biotech, construction for that matter, new manufacturing, all of those areas. So this new council has a unique opportunity to look with fresh eyes at the obstacles that impede attraction of employers and talent that they need for the 21st century economy that we want in Montgomery County. One clear obstacle is duplicative and obsolete regulations that take time and frustrate our entrepreneurs and innovators, and they're a deterrent to recruiting and expanding our businesses here. Congressman Jamie Raskin says it is an unnecessary tax on time. I bet you didn't know he said that. Anyhow, we believe, for that reason, that it is a great idea to establish a regulatory review commission to identify and eliminate those obstacles. And we stand ready to work with the council. We understand it's going to take a leadership role here. We're in. So let us help you with that. Further to that point, those commission's recommendations should be included in your future budgets.
Thank you,
By the way, President Navarro, I have to say one thing. You specifically mentioned economic development in the Washington Post today. We agree. And we hope that you'll add funding for economic development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jane Riddicker.
Good afternoon, Jane Rediker, on behalf of the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce. Our membership mirrors the demographics and the size of the Montgomery County Chamber, but we're focused on Silver Spring. So my comments are going to be a little bit more parochial, a little bit more focused just on Silver Spring. You have my written testimony. It's longer than usual for those of you who've been here before, but I hope you'll take the time to read it. The time I have this afternoon, I want to focus on the big picture and just on 4 areas of the budget where we think that Silver Spring needs some attention. We believe Silver Spring's at a tipping point. Our population has grown by 23% since 2010, and more residents are coming. But the budget for the urban district, the budget for the parking lot district, and the budget for police in the 3rd district have been flat at best. That's not acceptable, and that has to change. Continued and increased involvement in making sure that we have a clean and safe Silver Spring is critical to our future. We need to make sure our residents, our customers, our employees, and our employers, and those businesses that are going to be looking at that former Discovery building want to come to Silver Spring, feel that it's a good place to come, and feel that it's a safe place to come as well. So the urban district budget. My testimony specifies some of the things that we agree with this Urban District Advisory Committee need to happen in Silver Spring. Our red shirts do a fantastic job, but there are not enough hours in the day for the too many projects that they have to take on for a whole lot of reasons these days. Things like making sure that our sidewalks are repaired, things like making sure that we don't look worn, which is one of the comments we've heard from some folks in Silver Spring. Taking care of cleaning up after some of our unfortunate residents that don't have a place to go during the day or challenged by mental health issues or substance abuse issues. That's what a lot of the red shirts spend a lot of time doing these days, and we need to address that and fix that. Parking lot district. Proposed budget for the Silver Spring Parking Lot District might work for DOT's financials, but it doesn't work for Silver Spring. The proposed $2.6 million increase in revenue does not accompany an accompanying or a increase in services. We don't see that. We need security in our parking garages after hours. Right now, there's nothing after 10 or 10:30 at night. So patrons of our wonderful nighttime economy, which some of you helped to develop, they're leaving the restaurants, the employees are leaving their businesses, and there's no security in the parking garages late at night. So we think that any increase in the parking lot district budget needs to be accompanied by some security. There's also another challenge, though, is we loaned the Bethesda Parking Lot District $3 million a few years ago. Was supposed to be paid back last year, didn't get paid back. Now it's on the agenda for being paid back in 2021. Just part of that payback this year would help us to add some security or would decrease the huge increases we're talking about on street parking. We're talking about street parking going from $1 to $2.25 an hour and even $4 an hour. That's insane. The police. We don't have enough police. Yes, we realize it's a problem across the board, but we need to fix that. And the homeless advocates with Progress Place will be here later, and we agree and we support their recommendations.
Thank you very much. Laura Irwin, please press the button at the base of the microphone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Council President Navarro and members of the council, hello, everybody. My name is Laura Irwin, and I am the chair of the Community Action Board. We thank the council for implementing policies that promote equity and increase opportunities among all our residents, but specifically our low-income residents. I'm here specifically to talk to you about our budget. Community Action receives federal funding through the Community Service Block Grant and Head Start Grant, as well as county funding. We are keenly aware of the effect of our reliance on federal grants, which are essentially flatlined. Since many employees are partially or fully funded through CSBG and Head Start, DHHS must annually expend a larger portion of its grant on personnel-related costs, thereby reducing funding available for services funded through the operating budget. For example, from FY18 to FY20, CAA's operating budget was reduced from $208,688 to $112,603, or approximately 46%. And we anticipate an operating budget that will experience a similar reduction this year. This is a great concern for our board because it impacts critically our services and initiatives. For example, our VITA and EITC outreach are impacted as if we do not have the specific budget that is necessary to cover the VITA and EITC, we would have to close 3 of our sites that could leave 750 households without their taxes completed, including people case managed by HHS. That's huge, especially since our residents really rely on that money to be able to operate on a daily basis. We also need to assure the service continuity at the TESS Community Action Center, because since the critical Flower Branch apartment fire, the walk-in center in Long Branch has unfortunately experienced staff turnover among its community service aides, and with a vacancy that has lasted for over a year. Therefore, our residents' social services have been not completed as fully as we would like, even though we continue to serve all of our clients, and we serve over 2,579 people in the year FY18. We would like to continue to do that, so please take a look at our budget in that area. To address these concerns, we do offer a solution, and we would like our board requests that the agency contract monitor position, which is a program manager 1, with salary and benefits currently funded 44% through CSBG, to be adjusted and fully funded through the county's general fund. It is an opportunity for you to help us out in this. Our board believes that this is an important issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Susan Jenkins.
Good afternoon, Council President Navarro and esteemed members of the Montgomery County Council. I'm Susan Jenkins, CEO of Montgomery County's designated local arts agency, the Arts and Humanities Council. For the new council members, I welcome you, and for those who are returning, thank you for your past support of the county's arts and humanities sector and for the opportunity to present our FY20 budget appropriation request to you today. Our request is based on our directive to provide support for arts and humanities organizations, individual artists and scholars, and to manage the Public Arts Trust. The county executive has recommended flat funding for our agency for FY20. Economic realities within our county highlight the importance of our grant making. Our research demonstrates that the growth of many nascent, seasoned, and legacy organizations, artists, and scholars across the county requires increased investment in traditionally under-resourced communities, increased financial and human resources, increased technical and capacity building assistance, and increased professional development opportunities. With recent studies illustrating that 4 of the top 10 ethnically diverse cities in the U.S. are located right here, our agency remains committed to supporting a vibrant cultural landscape countywide. To meet this growing multicultural demand, we are requesting an FY20 budget increase of at least $550,000 over the FY19 appropriation to address the 17% increase in budget sizes for general operating and project-based grants, the increased demand from applicants in the most competitive categories. And we also need the autonomy to allocate grant funds without condition. We ask that the council maintain support for the FY20 $1 million for capital improvement grants. To be impactful, we need a minimum of 10% for the Arts and Humanities Council's administration. We request an amendment to Section 8-45, Appropriation for Public Art, to state that, quote, each year the County Council should appropriate funds for the next fiscal year to the Public Arts Trust in an amount equal to a minimum of 0.05%. And annual increases of 4% to the Public Arts Trust to bring the budget closer to recommended funding levels and recognize expenses related to inflation. esteemed members of the County Council. I urge you to augment the County Executive's proposed FY20 budget for the Arts and Humanities Council and Public Arts Trust by increasing the appropriation for regranting, for administration, for the trust, and by addressing a legislative change. Considering that the arts and humanities sector contributes over $181 million in economic impact to our great county, these enhancements will help position our agency, our sector, and our county for even greater financial growth while delivering priceless quality of life factors that attract residents, visitors, and businesses alike. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to move on to Group B. Thank you. Betty Emble, Robert Nelson, Judith Clark, Paulette Dickerson, Gordon Brenning, Michael Friedman. Wait for her to move her to the left. Okay. Okay, we're going to change the order a little bit because we are waiting for a translator. We're going to start with Mr. Robert Nelson.
Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. I'm Robert Nelson from the Goshen area, Up County, and a former chair of the Up County Citizens Advisory Board. It was just like a dream. 2 Thursdays ago, I was driving up the Cabin John Parkway, merging onto the Capitol Beltway. All 4 lanes were completely empty of traffic. But my dream was a nightmare for those who were trying to get from Virginia to Maryland when the Cabin John American Legion Bridge was closed for 12 hours. We just don't have good bridges there. The ones inside the Beltway were jammed, and a bridge 40 miles away was the only other option for people to get across. You know, centuries ago, there were multiple crossings because people had the ferries, and Seneca Road was one of those places. It's no hyperbole. We have a congestion emergency, and every day drivers are spending thousands of dollars in additional time and stress. Perhaps you're thinking that the state is going to bail us out. Well, I recall the state was working on a I-270 Route 15 multimodal study. I think they tabled it for over a decade, and they're just starting again. But nothing right now is really being done to improve north-south mobility north of I-370. So we have a congestion emergency, and when one declares an emergency, everyone rushes to the problem. Emergency we need to stop and do things differently. Transportation is the #1 priority for Montgomery County residents, and we are not treating it that way in the proposed budget. Now, this morning in that report overview of the budget, let me quote that. Each year, the council also makes extensive changes in the budgets to reflect its priorities and initiatives. So that means we need to defer projects that are a lower priority and immediately reprogram operating and capital funding to improve the reliability and effectiveness of intelligent traffic signalization, restore our rapidly deteriorating infrastructure, and complete the 5.6-mile gap in the Mid-County Highway. You know, approximately $6 billion will have been invested in east-west mobility improvements. That means the Purple Line and the ICC. So we only need about 5% of that investment to dramatically improve north-south mobility between Clarksburg and Gaithersburg. Montgomery County residents can't wait until some pie-in-the-sky bailout by the feds or the state. So it's time for you all, our elected Montgomery County officials, to immediately respond to the congestion emergency and address the pressing needs of the Up County, the fastest growing region of our county. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Brent, do you mind moving over 1 seat so we can get the translator right there? Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we'll go back to Ms. Betty Embo. And there is a button at the base of the microphone. Okay. Okay, and there's a button at the base of the microphone.
Yes, I would like to know if it's possible for me to speak 3 minutes and then the interpreter will
Yes,
repeat what I have
yes,
to
but
say.
just make sure that you're closer in.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Oui, vous pouvez le faire chaque 3 minutes.
Thank you. Bonjour Madame la Présidente Navarro, le vice-président Katz et les membres du Conseil du Comté.
Merci pour cette occasion de témoigner devant vous cet après-midi. Mon nom est Betty Mbo. Je suis mère de 3 élèves du comté de Montgomery et l'un d'eux est dans l'éducation spécialisée. Aujourd'hui, je suis ici pour demander au comté d'établir un centre d'immersion en anglais pour les enfants et pour leurs familles. Je suis originaire d'Afrique, j'ai grandi en France et maintenant je vis à Silver Spring dans le Maryland. Je porte en moi trois cultures différentes. Je ne me considère plus comme une citoyenne d'un pays quelconque. Je me considère comme une citoyenne de l'univers. Notre comté est également très diversifié. 41,5% des résidents du comté âgés de 5 ans et plus parlent une autre langue que l'anglais. Et 34% de ces résidents disent qu'ils parlent l'anglais à la maison. Ce qui m'amène ici aujourd'hui, c'est l'importance de la communication. Je suis ici comme la voix des sans-voix. Je représente tous les étrangers de Maryland qui ont à faire face au manque de communication en anglais et aussi qui ont un enfant qui fréquente les écoles de MCPS. Ils ne savent pas par où commencer ni à qui demander. Ces parents, tout comme moi, nous avons un problème pour aider nos enfants à faire leurs devoirs. J'ai un enfant de 5 ans et j'arrive pas à l'aider dans ses devoirs. C'est une humiliation pour un parent de ne pas comprendre les devoirs de son fils à la maternelle. Nos enfants sont les futurs leaders de demain. Beaucoup d'entre eux sont nés ici, ils sont américains. Chaque enfant a le droit d'aller à l'école, le droit d'être protégé contre toute forme de discrimination et aussi le droit à la liberté d'information, d'expression. Je viens demander votre aide pour ces étudiants parlant une langue étrangère à la maison. Comment un enfant peut-il réussir de cette façon? J'espère que vous trouverez une solution pour ces enfants et aussi pour leurs parents. Ma proposition est la suivante. Créer un centre d'apprentissage d'activités extrascolaires, un programme d'immersion après l'école pour les enfants et leurs parents, avec l'anglais en seconde langue. Ce programme est très nécessaire pour aider les parents et les enfants à éviter l'isolement, le taux d'échec à l'école et le chômage en raison de la non-maîtrise d'anglais. Quels sont les avantages? Les enfants réussissent plus à l'école et ils sont plus confiants. Les parents apprennent l'anglais rapidement, entourés de plusieurs enfants. Il y a aussi la diversité culturelle et linguistique, la mixité sociale et le partage des valeurs. Je viens aussi vous aider par moi-même en tant que bénévole pour offrir mon temps à identifier ces familles dans les écoles et dans les églises. Mon association Face of Silence sera en mesure de mettre en place cette structure. Beaucoup de familles souffrent en silence et ils attendent votre aide. Je vous remercie pour tous les programmes d'éducation que vous avez déjà fait auparavant, comme la loterie d'immersion, Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, ESOL programme pour les enfants. J'espère que vous serez attentifs à ce problème qui affecte de nombreuses familles dans le Maryland. Je vous en remercie.
Merci. Okay, you can start.
Yes. To the President Nancy Navarro, the 4th District, the program is for more affordable youth recreation programs, after school, English Immersion Center. Good morning, President Navarro, Vice President Cast, and members of the County Council. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you this morning. My name is Betty, and I'm a mother of 3 Montgomery County students, and one of them is in the special education. Today I'm here to ask that the county establish an English Immersion Center for children and their families. I am from Africa. I grew up in France, and now I'm living in Maryland, Silver Spring. I carry with me 3 different cultures. I no longer consider myself as a citizen of a country. I consider myself as a citizen of the universe. Our county also is very diverse. 41.5% of the county residents aged 5 and older speak a language other than English. And 34.4% of these residents say they speak English less than very well. While the poverty rate for county residents 5 and older is 5.2%, it's 9% among those who speak a language other than English at home. What brings me here today is the importance of communication. I am here like the voice of voiceless. I represent all foreigners, Maryland families who have to face with this issue, a lack of communication in English, and who have a child attending MCPS schools. They don't know where to start and who to ask. Those parents and I have big trouble to help our children with their homework. It's like an humiliation for parents not to understand the duties of a son in kindergarten. Our children are tomorrow's future leaders. Many of them were born here. Every child has the right to go to school, the right to be protected against all forms of discrimination, the right for freedom of information, expression, and participation. I am coming to ask your help for those students speaking a foreign language at home. How can a child succeed by this way? I hope you will find a solution for these children and also for their parents. My proposition is the following. Create a learning center, an after-school immersion program for children and parents with English as a second language. This program is very necessary to help parents and kids to avoid isolation, failure rate at school, and employment due to lack of English language. What are the benefits? Kids succeed more at school and are more confident. Parents learn English quickly surrounded by several children. English skills and a business English help parents to find a good job. Avoid poverty, no babysitter or childcare to pay, cultural and linguistic diversity. School mix, sharing values. I will help as a volunteer and offer you my time to identify those families in schools, churches, and community to join this program. My nonprofit Face of Silence will be able to set up this structure. A lot of families suffer in silence and wait after you for their success. They really need your support.
Can you just wrap up just one sentence, because we do have to move on.
Yes, okay. This program may impact positively my life because as a mother of an autistic son, I have to understand correctly the medical and IEP reports. That is not easy. Thank you. And thank you, Betty Mbo, advocate for family speaking another language at home.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
pleasure.
Mercy. Judith Clark.
Good afternoon, President Navarro, Vice President Katz, and council members. I'm Judith Clark, and I'm the CEO of Women Who Care Ministries. And I'm honored to be here today to testify of the criticality, the power, and the impact of our Helping Kids Eat Backpack Weekend Meal Program, and to request that the county exec's recommendation is ratified. The requested funds are primarily for food, facility, and staff. We're excited because this year we celebrate 18 years of being of service to the community. Our mission is to help hurting people heal and to glorify God through service to others. And we can't think of a better way to uphold this mandate than through this program, which each Friday, in partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools, provides nutritious weekend meals to more than 2,300 low-income kids in elementary and middle schools to ensure that they're not going to bed hungry over the weekend. The children eligible are identified by school personnel who provide us with the number of needing food, the kids needing food at that particular school. We then deliver the food sacks to the school, and then the school discreetly hands a needy child, each needy child with a food sack on Friday afternoons. Now they're able to return to school on Monday, ready to learn. Hunger and malnutrition affects the cognitive and behavioral development of children and also affects their physical growth. Hence, the need for this program is significant. Our recent evaluations revealed that 99% of the people who we surveyed were very satisfied with this program. And more than 70% of the counselors indicated that since child hunger, unfortunately, has reached epidemic proportions, there is a great need to provide the weekend meals to at least an additional 15% more students at their school. But the survey also expressed the great impact that the weekend meals are making. Receiving the food makes the children feel real special and cared for. Attendance has increased on Fridays and on Mondays. The parents have developed a deeper rapport with the school because they now feel more supported. And teachers say that they witness fewer behavioral issues on Mondays because the children had weekend meals. And they all appreciate the accessibility since the weekend food comes through the school. So today, I'm not merely testifying about how great we think the program is, but rather we share with you input from the counselors, parents, and the recipients of the program. And equally as important, this program is very cost-effective because each food sack costs only $4, and this is a result of the top-notch leveraging of our funds, volunteer, and staff. And the community response to ending child hunger is so encouraging. People all over the county are excited about this program because they know that feeding a kid today is investing in the world's future tomorrow. So with your continued support, which we're grateful for, we will continue to play a significant part in ending child hunger one day, one child at a time. Child hunger, so serious yet so solvable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Paulette Dickerson.
Hi, my name is Paulette Dickerson. I'm here today to ask that you vote to fund the Montgomery County Public Library System at the proposed level of $43 million or above. Libraries are the original multi-purpose tool. We all know that libraries often provide the first formal encounters with literacy and books for young children. For children whose parents or caregivers don't have the wherewithal to read to them or the time to talk with them intensively, it is not so much that they fall behind when they start school, it is that they seldom catch up. Children who are read to start school with a huge advantage in vocabulary size and conversational abilities. Reading is the entry to solid information skills, online or off. The greatest good that libraries may perform in these days of information uncertainty is to provide consistent, accurate, and reliable sources for knowledge about any subject imaginable. In the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, two teenagers set up shop in a corner of a local Circle K parking lot and research a history paper by asking random strangers questions about the subject. They get into a lot of trouble. In real life, we get into trouble by imagining that the information fed to us by algorithms for hire in places like Facebook, Google, even Amazon is accurate or even to the point. The web we use is a giant marketing tool. Your question and its answer are both opportunities to make a buck. But the only monies that matter to the Montgomery County Public Libraries are in the CIP and operating budgets. Please support them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Gordon Brennan?
Good afternoon. It's springtime, so that's why I'm here. Speaking as an individual, but an active member of the Taxpayers League. The FY20 budget has unique challenges to balance the risks of uncertain revenue projections while funding new transition strategies, keeping existing effective strategies in place, and probably most importantly, scaling back the less effective programs and strategies. One basic problem we have, and it's the elephant in the room, is our revenues are falling under smart growth policies of the past. The number of jobs in the county has grown only 2.7% since 2008, second worst in the region. And most of that growth was government. We actually lost jobs on the private side. Transition strategies outlined for economic development of small businesses are the same tired old approaches that haven't worked in the past to expand our stagnant tax base, grow the bioscience business network. At the same time, the county, MCPS, and WSSC budgets continue to bloat out with hefty county pay raises paid for with delayed retiree health care contributions. This is the second year in a row, and no productivity improvements to show for it. We've stopped treading water and we're sinking fast. Here's some ideas that'll save hundreds of millions of dollars in wasted spending and improve the lives of our residents. MCPS. Hold the line on spending above MOE until a plan to narrow the achievement gap is completed. We've been working with the superintendent for 2 years on a plan, and Craig knows this well. And it has yet to outline how we're going to use interventions, how we're going to use expanded programs to increase the proficiency of general population kids at risk. The state requires that we cut the gap in half by 2030, but we have zero plans to do that. We have a lot of rhetoric. 45% of every dollar that they spend is spent on overhead, has nothing to do with instruction. That's the worst in the nation. None of the $70 million that the county spends from its own budget for nurses, police, special academic assistants are linked to the MCPS strategies to narrow the gap, because there aren't any. Pre-K. Instead of spending $7 million on the centralized approach, which only reaches 2,300 kids, redirect funds from this centralized delivery model to a more decentralized approach to scale up and approach the 30,000 kids that should be reached, shifting service delivery to local control in neighborhoods where eligible kids live. Public safety. The police budget's up 5%, driven largely by big pay increases, but it's got a bloated investigation unit. They cut 8 people. We've been asking for hundreds of these people. The closure rates remain unchanged and comparable to Fairfax, which has 1/3 fewer investigators. WSSC. It's time to take a stand on behalf of ratepayers and say no to a budget request with an above-market 5% rate increase. It gets worse, 6% next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Friedman?
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Friedman, and I'm here on behalf of the Montgomery County Sierra Club. About 16 months ago, the council declared a climate emergency and resolved to dramatically reduce emissions in the county over the next several years. What will that entail? Well, according to the county's work group, that means dramatically reducing reliance on fossil fuels. It means increasing dramatically energy efficiency in all our buildings. It means dramatically increasing reliance on zero-emission vehicles and a number of other things. How do we know where to start? What should we prioritize? The Climate Mobilization Work Group listed dozens and dozens of policies and programs and financial incentives. And so how do we know which choices to make, which will produce the greatest reductions for the least cost? There's currently no funding in the budget for technical assistance to achieve this purpose. The administration has committed to look for parts of the budget that could be repurposed to address this need. And if they find those funds, that will be all to the good. But Sierra Club is asking the council to independently make a judgment to ensure that there are adequate funds for consulting services to establish priorities. Because in the long run, successfully identifying the highest priority programs represents the most prudent approach to decarbonizing. Our review of the budget shows also that there are no additional funds from last year for the Office of Sustainability. When the administration establishes its work groups to come up with priorities, there will presumably be programs that are to be introduced, but there are no funds, no additional funds in the budget to begin that process. So we know that these are tough times, but this is an emergency, and so rather than wait another budget cycle to have any funds to begin to introduce those programs, we ask that there be some additional funds for the Office of Sustainability to develop such programs. My written testimony in an addendum has some specific requests identified, and at that, I'll thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on to the next group. Thank you so much. Group C. Ed Amateti, Oluseyi Ilupegu, Pete Fosselman, Shane Rock, Rachel Watanabe, and Afshin Abedi. We'll start with Ed Amateti.
How are you all doing? Good to see you. I'm testifying today because I hope budget deliberations will not be limited to quibbling and nibbling at the margins. That instead, we seriously revisit priorities and place policies under the microscope to double check whether they're achieving worthwhile goals or just mucking up the works, because some things appear to be amiss. For more than 10 years, we've experienced economic underperformance, a decline in private sector jobs of greater than 13,000, and zero growth in the commercial tax base. Our neighbors and most of the rest of the country have not had these problems. We've had too many revenue shortfalls and tax increases that fail to fetch the revenues forecasted. Much of this is because of our policies. Housing has become more unaffordable for everyone. And for the poorest, the waiting list for housing vouchers exceed the number we're able to furnish by a factor of more than 10 times. While this is a struggle for many communities, we exasperate our condition with land use, smart growth, stormwater regulation, and permitting policies, and other policies that increase the cost of housing and reduce the quantity of housing stock. We've seen our schools dispossessed of their position of prominence in Maryland. Some schools have scores that have sunk to New York City levels. Our achievement gap hasn't budged for 40 years. Our chances of funding pre-K objectives seem remote. Our backlog of needed school facility upgrades is $800 million, while portables proliferate, and even our builders concur that the cost of school construction is much higher than they should be. We have a similar backlog of 160 unbuilt transportation projects and the ignoble distinction of having one of the 2 longest commutes in all of America. We are only able to fund 50% of needed road resurfacing. Spending on stormwater abatement is out of kilter, and the consent decree is wholly unfair to our county. It unconscionably adds 10 to 15% to the cost of building our schools and contributes to our facility backlog. It takes millions of dollars of land out of development, increases housing costs, reduces parkland, discriminates against Clarksburg residents, and after all this is environmentally inefficient, if not mostly ineffective. The 12-year trend of the operating budget shows water quality has increased 447%, while our school system has grown only 10%. Libraries, culture, and recreation has increased 111%, while HHS grew only 4.5%. The Liquor Control Board grew 25%, while law enforcement a minute 0.3%, and transportation shrunk 18%. The fiscal 20 budget proposal does little to address these and other issues. We need to reflect on how current policies may contribute to these problems. We are spending on programs not measured against strategic, can I finish the sentence?
Just a sentence, please.
Sorry. Then I'll just say I've included some recommendations. It's on the following page. Thanks
Thank you.
very much.
Olusei Ilopegu, please press the button at the base of the microphone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of Montgomery County Council. My name is Oluseyi Ilupeju. I'm a resident of Montgomery County and I live in Gettysburg. I am a graduate of Montgomery College My Best Apartment Maintenance Technician Program in the Workforce Development and Continuing Education. I took time off from work today so I could be here to ask you to fully fund Montgomery College's operating budget request. Why? Because I know that Montgomery College, with all of the training and educational opportunities, makes a difference in the lives of people. I know because Montgomery College changed my life. Before I moved here from my home country of Nigeria years ago, I had acquired on-the-job training in home maintenance and improvement. However, since I have been living in the United States, I found out that in order to be marketable for a job, I needed formal training with an industry certificate. Nevertheless, since life as a new migrant presented me with competing priorities, I was compelled to take the first job that came my way to support my family. The $9 per hour pay I was receiving was not sufficient to support my 2 children and my wife. I had to find a better way to support my family. After seeing a flyer about Montgomery College's My Best Apartment Maintenance Technician Certificate Program, I attended an information session where I decided to pursue this training opportunity so I could gain better employment. This program has definitely been a blessing for my family and for me. I can attest that I have secured job skills from this program that will last a lifetime. I strengthened my repair and maintenance skills. I also learned problem-solving skills and how to be a team player, which are essential for working in the building maintenance industry. Particularly helpful to me was the support the program offers with extra skills such as stronger interviewing and verbal and written communication skills. Resume writing was an essential skill, too, that helped during my job search. With the certification, I am now employed with Baptista Construction as a building maintenance technician. Let us continue funding Montgomery College and the important training programs like the apartment maintenance technician program the college offers, opportunities that otherwise would not be possible for people like me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Pete Fosselman.
Good afternoon, council members. This also, like Ms. Godwin, is my first time testifying in front of you all, and I'm happy you're here. As you know, I'm the former mayor of Kensington, and I'm coming to testify in opposition to delaying the extension of Summit Avenue. For those of you that may not be familiar with the extension of Summit Avenue, it was part of the 2012 sector plan, which was approved by our town council, the planning board, and an 8-to-1 vote on the county council at the time. The plan lowered allowable building heights, but it increased density. It also allowed mixed-use zoning in the town, which we had not had before, and it protects the residential areas within the town. There are only two choices of travel right now when you're going down the Connecticut Avenue corridor, and that's either the ride-on or the Metro bus, which I guess is two choices, but bus or your own vehicle. And we don't have Metro. We have MARC, but MARC goes east-west. And we don't have BRT. 60,000 cars a day go up and down Connecticut Avenue. So 120,000 people both times use Connecticut Avenue. It's one of the highest traveled areas in the entire county. The sector plan's main rush hour mitigation tool, and pretty much the only tool that was recommended in the sector plan, is this Summit Avenue extension. It was recommended by the Urban Land Institute when we did a TAP panel in 2009, and it was also recommended by the Department of Transportation for the county and the State Highway Administration, as well as, of course, the town council. My successor, Mayor Furman, will be here, if not today, in the next day or so to testify also in favor of this. And the extension, for those who aren't familiar with it, would run north and south. It would extend from Farragut Avenue at Pliers Mill up to from Pliers Mill north up to Farragut Avenue. And while this is a small area and a small extension, it allows another choice for these 60,000 commuters that are going through Kensington now, many of which have to sit in that horrible Knowles and Connecticut Avenue intersection. The development's coming, whether we like it or not. I like it. And there's one finished new retail center. There are 3 more new developments coming, and possibly a 4th on the horizon, all within the little town of Kensington. We need this extension to help mitigate the traffic, and I just want to support keeping it within the CIP and keeping it on time. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane Rock.
Good afternoon.
Please press the button.
There we go. Good afternoon, President Navarro and members of the council. My name is Shane Rock, CEO of Interfaith Works. County government relies on nonprofits to do the work that would otherwise fall to government. We are efficient and effective in serving the community, and yet every year we are told to do more with less. Each year, the Interfaith Works Clothing Center serves more than 13,000 Montgomery County residents with free clothing, household goods, and wraparound services. And yet in fiscal year 19, county funding for the clothing center declined by $35,000 from the previous year. For fiscal year 20, the county executive increased recommended community grant support to $40,000, and we ask that you at least match that support. The Interfaith Works Vocational Services Program ensures that nearly 300 Montgomery County residents have the soft skills necessary to get and keep a job. With a consistent job placement rate exceeding 65% in a year at an average starting wage of nearly $14 an hour, this is an effective program. It helps the hardest to seek job seekers. Despite success, our vocational services program struggles to attract government support. The county executive recommended $43,000 for fiscal year 20, and we ask that the county council match that amount with a grant of at least $43,000. The Interfaith Works Women's Center is the temporary home for 70 women experiencing homelessness every night. Women are now only staying a remarkable 88 days on average in the shelter before moving to permanent housing. The Women's Center almost always has a waiting list because the 70-bed capacity is not enough to serve the number of women experiencing homelessness in our county. By diverting women, working with them to identify other permanent housing options, we can help those women avoid needing a shelter bed. The unfunded $38,000 for the Women's Center is to pay for a part-time diversion specialist who will work with women to divert them from the homeless service system before they have to enter. Located at the Interfaith Works Clothing Center, Interfaith Works Connections features 2 bilingual professional caseworkers who conduct a comprehensive assessment of families' needs and strengths to help them deal with acute financial crises and avoid future ones. The 2 staff assisted more than 1,100 people in the first 8 months of fiscal year 19. We asked the county council to provide $19,000 to increase the hours of the part-time caseworker to full-time. We'll be able to help more families. We appreciate the county executive security funding for Progress Place and ask the county council to add to that amount recommended. Finally, we join the more than 160 member organizations of nonprofit Montgomery in advocating in the strongest terms for a 3% increase in base funding and county contracts to nonprofits. We cannot continue asking our staff to bear the burden of inadequate funding. We are at the point where we have to say to you and our Montgomery County neighbors that without the resources to sustain our present level of work, we'll be forced to do less with less. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Rachel Watanabe here? No? Okay, Afshin Abedi.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Afshin Abedi, and I'm the president of the Maryland Association of Adult Day Services, whose members provide medical daycare services throughout the state, and in particular, centers in Montgomery County with capacity to serve over 2,400 participants per day. We request that Council add a line item to the FY 2020 budget to continue the medical daycare minimum wage supplement that was added to the FY 2019 budget. Due to time limitations, we have submitted a more detailed testimony in writing and will be glad to answer any questions you may have in the future as they may arise. Basically, we are primarily Medicaid providers, and as you already know, Medicaid prevents us from charging our participants, so we can't pass the increased cost to our customers, not like other businesses. We also can't reduce our staff because we have a staffing ratio requirements to meet, and by Kumar. And also, Medicaid pays one flat fee for all the medical daycares across the whole state. So if you could get the same pay for providing this service in Salisbury compared to Montgomery County, that puts Montgomery County providers in disadvantage. So Medicaid has chronically underfunded AMDCs over the past decade, and rapid increase in minimum wage on top of the fragile financial state of AMDCs has created an existential emergency that requires the county to provide immediate supplement to enable the AMDCs to continue functioning and serving the fragile elderly and disabled adults in the community. Prior county council and the county executive and their corresponding staff and advisors appreciated the gravity of the situation that AMDCs are facing, recognized the Medicaid reimbursement alone are simply not sufficient to cover the cost of AMDC business in Montgomery County during this transition, and when we're subjected to rapid increase in minimum wage. The county approved for the first time a line item in the budget to provide a supplement to assist AMDCs with labor costs associated with minimum wage increase in FY 2019. We greatly appreciate that. HHS had the responsibility to come up with a program, methodology, legal language, and so on, to be able to disperse that funding. It took some time, and unfortunately we lost 75% of what was offered to us because of that, as the new county executive wanted to come up with some savings and so on. And this has resulted in increased pressure on our organization and has made us even more in need of support for 2020 budget. This is a cause of serious concern and demonstrates the need for the county to provide assistance to AMDCs. It's not, it doesn't cost that much for the programs to be brought to whole. I've provided both a graph in the third page of the handout that represents minimum wage for the county and minimum wage for the state. There is a gap between them, and also the table that shows now that the state has committed to minimum wage increase, this actually reduces our burden by half, nearly half. So this is fantastic.
Yes.
Look forward to meeting with you and discussing.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're now going to move on to Group D. Juanita Gowdy, Ginger Ingalls, Paula Ross, Penelope Stetina, Elizabeth Barnes, and Irene Meisel. Yes, you can sit down, yes. All right, so we'll start with Juanita Gowdy. Press the button at the base. There.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the County Council, all members, President Navarro, and everybody. I am Juanita Gowdy, Chair of the Montgomery County, Maryland section of the National Council of Negro Women. Mary McLeod Bethune founded our organization in 1935 in New York City. She was an educator, statesman, philanthropist, humanitarian, and civil rights activist. The Montgomery County, Maryland section of the National Council of Negro Women Incorporated is continuing the legacy of Dr. Bethune. She gave us a legacy that we are to take care of our young people. She said, "I leave you a responsibility to our young people. The world around us really belongs to youth, for one day they will take over its future. This responsibility starts early. The importance of childhood education is essential to building a foundation for critical thinking skills, social development, and lifelong learning. It prepares students for career entrances and or college acceptances at the end of their high school tenure. It is imperative that the school board budget be funded at the level requested by the Board of Education of the Montgomery County Public Schools in order to continue the work that has begun on addressing the opportunity gap. We must see to it that all students start school ready from day one. The school board's 2020 budget speaks to this with some proposals such as the extended pre-care programs, add focused teachers to highly impacted elementary schools, expand the Arts Initiative program to elementary school. The Montgomery County, Maryland section of the National Council of Negro Women is committed to supporting and working with students from pre-K to high school graduation. One of our educational programs is FAME, Females Achieving and Maintaining Excellence. We have a FAME program at Sligo Middle School, James Herbert Blake High School, and Springbrook High School. What we do is foster cultural pride, sense of resiliency, and social skills for middle and high school. I'm running out of time. Okay, the three components of the program are academic success, such as goal setting, resume writing, career exploration, cultural and social enrichment. Again, we really ask you to fund the whole budget because students need this. Last word, last sentence. In accordance with Dr. Bethune's legacy, I will close with her quote, "Invest in the human soul. Who knows? It might be a diamond in the rough." Thank you. Sorry, widow.
Thank you so much. Ginger Ingalls. Press the button at the base of the microphone. There's a button there at the base. Yeah. Nope.
I'm Ginger Ingalls, and I live in East Rockville. I've heard that I'm not alone, as half of seniors now who rent in Montgomery County are housing burdened, and that the number of seniors will double by 2040. I've submitted my application to the Housing Opportunities Commission. I've called the general number, and I am frustrated as I inquire. My status, their programs, and the wait list are confusing. I've been told there's no way to know where I am in line or when my turn will come up. The time frame for being, quote, selected, unquote, is mysterious. I've heard it might take 3 years, and when selected, I'd be given a case manager for the right match, and that selection is by computer juggling types of properties, programs, and populations with the time a person applies and what becomes available. I've changed my request from all programs to voucher and back again in hopes of receiving anything and adding on neighborhoods I would be willing to live in that I know might not be a good fit. I think we seniors should have a separate wait list for properties that either are for seniors only or for all ages, but with a built-in higher proportion designated for seniors. This growing population is more vulnerable and at risk and needs to age in place and should have a process for expedited service. After my husband died, I went back to school and became a licensed therapeutic craniosacral therapist in Washington, D.C. I had to move out of Washington to Maryland, where I've rented rooms for the last 6 years because to survive colorectal cancer, I lost my job, apartment, car, and savings to pay for treatment. Physically unable to go back to work, I retired in 2012, and I have been living on Social Security income and at poverty level, paying rent at between 40 to 50% of my income to private homeowners and at their mercy.
Thank you. Paula Ross.
Good afternoon, Council President Navarro and council members, and thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Paula Ross, and I'm the Executive Director at Metropolitan Ballet Theater, MBT, which is proudly celebrating 30 years of arts education, performances, and arts outreach work in the community. Our academy has locations in Gaithersburg and in Clarksburg now, and we have performed at the Robert E. Perilla Performing Arts Center at MC Rockville for all 30 of our annual production seasons. I'm also speaking to you today as chair of the Montgomery County Arts Advocates, an all-volunteer organization directly representing the interests of 63 nonprofit arts organizations. We are proud to join with our arts and humanities colleagues in testifying before you this week. Montgomery County Arts Advocates would like to express our thanks for the council's strong support of the arts and humanities community. The economic impact and employment data for our sector is well documented and has been submitted for your reference. However, the value of the arts and humanities goes far beyond the economics. 3 weeks ago this evening, a car drove through the front window of MBT's studio in Gaithersburg. We are beyond grateful that all of our students are physically unharmed, and we are moving forward with repairs. I raise this story because of the reactions that we received after the accident. Many of our families, including those of the 10 to 11-year-olds who were in the studio at the time of the accident, came to my team, thanking us for keeping their children safe and acknowledging that their children were upset because they felt their home was violated. Their home. Arts organizations like MBT and arts programs across the county become a home away from home for thousands of children and people of all ages, as well as for the artist educators and staff. Our programs nurture the creative spirits of our county, offering a respite from stresses of academics, work, or perhaps a tough situation at home. Our programs enhance, support, and partner with educational and social service programs. For those arts organizations located in buildings where people come to us, we're not only maintaining our facilities for community participation, but also making successful efforts to reach out to community members, youth through seniors, beyond our walls, through myriad outreach programs. As my colleagues and I administer arts programs throughout the community, we know a few things. We know that the arts is an equalizer in racial equity as we work hard to reach every corner of our county. We hope you will allow us to be a part of the conversation that you as a council are having in that regard to achieve racial and socioeconomic equity and access. We know we are expanding the worldview of our children by offering them experiences beyond the classroom. We know we are engaging older adults in music, art, and writing programs. We know we are accessible. We know we are supporting over 3,800 jobs. We know that in our diverse and creative county, every resident deserves meaningful experiences in the arts, and we will continue to meet the increasing demand. We know that we are a $181 million industry in the county. To that end, with the county's support, we have made unprecedented progress in developing the economic heft and vibrancy of our sector. We appreciate your steady and committed support, and we ask you to take a look at MCA's platform. Thank you.
We will. Thank you. Penelope Statina.
I believe that's me. I'm Penny Statina. Very, very honored to be given the opportunity to share some ideas with you. I am a retired attorney. I'm disabled by a stroke that took my memory, so I can't work anymore unless I want to go flip burgers at McDonald's. I have been going to Easter Seals Adult Daycare, but I'm here on behalf of the need for all of the adult daycare programs. I love daycare. I look forward to the fact that it's going to stimulate my brain, make me think, we play hangman. That sounds so silly, but it really gets the ball rolling. We play categories. Same thing happens. It wakes up my brain. We do some form of physical activity. I think this is true in all daycares of any kind, to get the body rolling, to get the endorphins going, to get the mind, body, and spirit going. The other thing I just said, spirit going, I really find that my life is managed by my spiritual life. I truly believe in a loving God, and I believe that God touches our lives in such a way that we can touch others' lives. Adult daycare has touched my life, has fulfilled my life. It gives me reason to get up in the morning. So I ask that when you look at the budget lines and you do your crosses down the page, please use your eraser next to adult daycares. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll probably say I don't remember.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Stetina, for coming over. Elizabeth Barnes.
Good afternoon, County Council President and council members. My name is Elizabeth Barnes. I am the Senior Director of Adult and Senior Services for Easter Seals, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We have a medical adult daycare center in Silver Spring, and I have a capacity of 91 participants a day. To date, in this fiscal year, we have given more than $80,000 in scholarships for adult daycare services. Our primary funding source is Medicaid. Medicaid doesn't allow us to pass on the increase to our participants. In addition, we are mandated to have a minimum staffing ratios, as was shared by Dr. Abedi. With Easter Seals high acuity, we require additional staff to ensure proper and quality care. Adult medical daycare services are the most cost-effective community-based services for aging and disabilities. We serve 16 through the lifespan. We provide a safety net for many participants in the community who have medical conditions needing support with their activities of daily living. We also serve a complex and vulnerable population, including those who are aging and diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, have medical complexities, have intellectual and or developmental disabilities, behavioral health diagnoses, and even battling substance abuse. We are not siloed. We serve everyone. We provide 2- and 3-person transfers, OT, PT, speech, nursing assessments, medication monitoring, transportation, plus social and enrichment activities. These services also support not only our participants, but also our caregivers and loved ones who are taking care of them as a much needed respite. We respectfully request the council to include a line item for the fiscal year 2020 budget that ensures our labor costs are kept steady with the increase in minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to touring the intergenerational program as well. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Irene Maisel. Please press the button there.
Good afternoon, esteemed council members. My name is actually Valerie Balanig, and I'm representing Irene.
Okay,
I would like to testify here on the behalf of the Mentor Network Adult Day Healthcare Services. Mentor Network is the largest medical daycare provider in Maryland and specifically in Montgomery County. We service about 450 vulnerable adults daily. We also employ about 130 employees on daily basis to service those providers. As mentioned by Liz Barnes and by Dr. Abedi earlier, our rates are maintained by Maryland regulations. We are required to retain appropriate staffing. The current reimbursement rate is not sufficient to cover the rapidly increasing labor costs due to the recent minimum wage law. Medical daycare is a key to the county's continuum of care and serve the fragile elderly as well as adults with medical disabilities. We ask that the county council add a line item to the fiscal year 2020 budget to support medical adult daycare as they have done in the 2019 budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one light, Councilmember Rice.
I just wanted to briefly say, Penelope Stetina, although you may not remember me, I certainly remember you from my visit to Easter Seals this past January, and so I want to. So let me just say that you are a fantastic and phenomenal advocate for what a phenomenal program that's there. So thank you very much for continuing to talk about what this program means. You represent everybody there who's benefiting from that in the community very well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to Group E. We have Nancy Bliss, Judy Feldman, Roger Payton, Nicola Whitman, Michael McDonald, and Valeria Belanik. I think that we just heard from you, so we'll take you off this one list. Okay, we're going to begin with Nancy Bliss.
There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to be here to talk to you about the budget in terms of what the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County recommends this year. And we are also very excited because coming up on Friday, we are going to be beginning our 100th year. So we have been serving Montgomery County for that long, and you'll hear about us next year, to be sure. Anyhow, the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County recognizes the many hours of consideration in the development of Montgomery County's FY20 operating budget so that the county can more readily meet growing challenges in our diverse community. Please note the following considerations. One, it is important that to take a historical look at the difference in how various financial units may have been used in past budgets and extra requests when considering across-the-board reductions. Moreover, it is unfair to make cuts in the following types of situations. One, when people have been initially more frugal than the funding provided, and two, some funding to maintain is needed or else Montgomery County loses its initial policy and property investments. Here are some of the specific recommendations that we have. In voting, the League supports the extra expenditures requested by the Board of Elections to meet the Council and Board of Elections goal of 1 hour or less waiting for voting lines. In education, we strongly support funding in the MCPS budget to expand the number of full-day slots in the pre-K and Head Start programs by 600 children in high-need areas. We also support the increased funding for special education services at the pre-K level and to better meet the needs of autistic students. We continue to support the funding needed to continue to provide the high-quality education for which the county is known. And we are glad to see plans for expansion of career programs in new fields. In housing, the League supports county policies and programs designed to increase the supply of affordable housing. And we also want to agree that you need to fund the 2 vacant code enforcement positions. And finally, in environment, we appreciate the modest increases in the budgets for solid waste services and environmental protection, and we hope that some of this funding will be applied specifically to create better public understanding and participation. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Judy Feldman.
Good afternoon, Council President Navarro and council members. My name is Judy Scott Feldman. I've lived for 26 years in the Potomac Highlands neighborhood of Glen Hills in Rockville. I've served on the Potomac Highlands Architectural Control Committee for over 20 years, and I'm currently the chair of that committee. My concern may seem small compared to the important issues raised by others testifying today, but it's important to my neighborhood. I'm here today to ask you to approve funds in the county's 2020 budget for a provision of Council Resolution 18-423 that calls for preparation of a limited master plan amendment to the 2002 Potomac Subregion Master Plan. As a resident of Glen Hills, I feel strongly that the council needs to fund the amendment to enable the Maryland National Park and Planning Commission's Planning Board to prepare the necessary plan to address the very serious public health and environmental issues caused by aging septic systems in my neighborhood, which has been well documented by county staff. I understand that some groups are arguing that allowing sewers in Glen Hills will allow massive development that conflicts with county housing policy.
As Resolution 18423 makes clear, this is not a zoning or development issue. In addition, our community has covenants, strictly enforced, that do not allow subdivision. Since the 1950s, our heavily wooded neighborhood, crisscrossed with streams and creeks, and home to large populations of birds, foxes, deer, and other wildlife, has developed slowly and carefully, precisely because of these covenants that not only forbid subdivision of lots, but also limit the size, height, and location of houses on lots. My neighbors and I would be the first ones to strongly oppose any attempt to change the character of our neighborhood. Our record since the 1950s is clear and consistent. I would venture to suggest that Potomac Highlands Citizens Association would be prepared to reaffirm our commitment to the covenants to allay any unwarranted concerns on the part of council members. In conclusion, I ask you to take the responsible and environmentally intelligent step that will allow plans for the orderly resolution of this problem to proceed by providing necessary funding in the 2020 budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Roger Payton?
Hi, I'm Roger Payton. I don't envy you your task today, as it involves a choice between, as it does not involve a choice between good and bad, but instead a choice between several goods. It's the kind of choice that cannot be made by applying some algorithm. Instead, it requires sound judgment. I hope here to refine your judgment by reconceptualizing the Department of Recreation's budget request. You have my written testimony. Now I want to emphasize only 2 points. First, county rec centers should not be thought of as gyms and weight rooms. In Palaces for the People, How Social Infrastructure Can Help Fight Inequality, Polarization, and the Decline of Civic Life, Eric Kleinenberg claims that public facilities such as recreation centers should be understood as parts of a community's social infrastructure that help to promote social interaction and civic engagement. A number of studies have suggested that our society is suffering from a plague of social isolation and alienation. These studies show that self-reported isolation has more than tripled in the past 4 decades, and that today, 27% of Americans report that they feel rarely or never understood by others. Social isolation is strongly correlated with depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, and is directly connected to increases in heart attacks and overall morbidity. Rec centers, I suggest, are places where people can make connections and overcome this isolation. They are a central part of our social infrastructure. And like all infrastructure, if social infrastructure is allowed to decay, it will be difficult or impossible to replace it. Second, the cuts in the rec department seem to me to be penny wise but pound foolish. The county has made substantial capital investments in our rec centers. The proposed cuts to the department's operating budget will inevitably lead to a decreased use of these centers. To the degree that these centers are underused, that capital investment is simply going to waste. Therefore, I ask the council to carefully examine the following reductions to the department's budget. A $49,000 cut to planned life cycle replacement fund, a $100,000 cut to senior programming, a $60,000 cut to youth events, and a $165,000 cut to center operating budgets. I hope that the council will be able to restore at least some of these cuts. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Nicola Whitman.
Good afternoon, Good afternoon, council members. I am Nicola Whiteman, Ayoba, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs.
Can you please move your microphone a little bit more to the center so we can hear you?
I did.
Yes.
Yep, thanks. It is critical that the county develop cohesive policies that will enhance its competitive position in the region and address its fiscal challenges. We hope that such efforts will result in much-needed focus by this government on increasing the tax base by making economic development and workforce development priorities. Notably, the proposed budget acknowledges the impact of the economy, especially volatility in the commercial market, on the county's fiscal health. AOPA has previously testified as to ongoing concerns with a struggling office market facing high vacancy rates that create the risk of declining property values and tax revenues, most recently in the face of yet another proposed increase to the recordation tax, which the council ultimately declined to adopt, in large part due to your leadership, Councilmember Navarro, and that of your colleagues, Councilmembers Katz and Reamer. We've also raised concerns about how tax and other policies can undermine the county's affordable housing goals. While tax increases proposed or adopted can negatively impact the economy and cement in the minds of some the county's reputation as a place that is business unfriendly, we must be mindful of the total cost of doing business in this county. This, of course, requires a discussion of fees. Whether it's a proposal to impose a new transportation demand management fee on existing buildings or the proposed $3 increase to the rental license fee, fees matter. Regulatory costs are a consideration in decisions to remain or locate in the county. Government regulation and policies, including new or increased fees, can limit access to housing by increasing the cost of producing new and preserving existing housing. We must also consider who pays these costs. Where market conditions allow, residential owners managers can pass on these costs to their residents, but in some submarkets they're not able to do so, and yet they must somehow absorb these new fees in addition to rising utility, personnel, and other costs. A similar experience, our commercial members experience something similar, where they're in submarkets you can't pass on these costs. Importantly, the council is an equal partner with the county executive as responsible stewards of the county's fiscal health and resources. It is thus imperative that the council conduct an analysis of the estimated costs or economic benefits to the county economy associated with any regulatory or legislative proposal. We must understand the impact, if any, of measures before the council for consideration today on the county's long-term economic viability. We can and should work together to develop county tax and regulatory policies that are supportive of business attraction and expansion. I see I'm running out of time. I just want to say a last note. You know, we're concerned about the size of the energy tax. We can continue to be concerned that it's not being reduced or eliminated. We understand the challenges that the county is facing now. We hope that the county and the council in particular will look at either directing some of those revenues to energy efficiency programs or a tax credit program in the short term to help mitigate the impact of that tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael McDonald.
Good afternoon, President Navarro, Vice President Katz, and members of the council. My name is Mike McDonald. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington, and it is my first time coming to present before this group, and I'm very intimidated, but it is great to be here. The mission of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Washington is to help boys and girls of all backgrounds, but especially those who need us most, build confidence, develop character, and acquire the skills needed to become productive, civic-minded, responsible adults. Our operations here in Montgomery County provide world-class youth development programming to over 190 6 to 18-year-old children per day. Our great achievement this year in 2018, we were able to open a brand new location at Watkins Mill Elementary School where we're currently serving 70 children per day. The support of Montgomery County provides direct service programming to disconnected youth at our Germantown clubhouse, our Watkins Mill Elementary School location, and our teen center at Montgomery College. In the current budget cycle, funding from Montgomery County has impacted over 198 independent children. Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington offers the following programs as a direct result of county investment. Diplomas to Degrees is a college readiness program which guides youth towards high school graduation and post-secondary education and career success. The Keystone Club, which is a charter small group leadership development organization that, not much different than you, they elect officers and conduct business in a way you would all be accustomed to. Career Launch is a career exploration and mentoring program. Teens take interest surveys, explore careers, identify training and college requirements, seek financial aid, and build job skills. And Power Hour, which is a critically important program to understand. Every afternoon when kids are released from school and they come to a Boys and Girls Club, the first hour of the day is spent making sure that their homework is completed. And because we have great connections with local elementary schools and teachers, and we understand the work that the kids are doing in school, we can provide direct help for those kids to complete their homework before their parents come and pick them up. And that happens every day after school. If they don't have homework, we find some for them. We also provide world-class STEM programming at all of our locations. We know that science, technology, engineering, and math skills are critical to the future. And one of the things that Boys and Girls Club can do is to provide hands-on experiential learning that is often difficult to do in a public school setting. Boys and Girls Club of Greater Washington is grateful for the programmatic support provided by Montgomery County. We encourage the county executive and the council to continue to support our efforts to provide life-changing, out-of-school time programming to the children who need us most. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. And with that, we are adjourned for this afternoon, and we will be back tonight at 7 p.m. Thank you.